Only a few days ago, his father died. The mother died from the disease when he was still a baby, and he does not feel any heat to the rest of his relatives. He had neither a girlfriend nor close friends. It seemed that there was neither a reason or strength to stay in this world until new thoughts appeared. He never imagined that life could turn so unexpectedly. Only a few minutes ago, a medium-sized man appeared from the building, dressed in a black suit, and his dark hair was easy to wander in the wind. He sighed heavily, feeling relieved that this difficult event was finally behind. However, in his thoughts, a sad awareness of how difficult it is to overcome the grief alone settled. Meanwhile, the guy thought of how difficult it was. Probably, his father had to worry when farewell to his mother. He walked on the road among a small group of people when dozens of cars flew past, who were endlessly rolling with their signals. The night has already entered its right, but there were still many people on the streets. Delivered in thought, he always returned to his parents' house, hoping that it was there that his father would meet. And so before his eyes appeared the silhouette of his father, who greeted him with joy, calling Kirito, and explained that he returned home again. The guy, after familiarizing with all the message, he laughed to the unlawfulness, remembering how his manager smiled at him. He seemed to be indifferent to the fact that Kirito lost his last member of his family. He confessed that he was tired of this life and everything that surrounded him. He came to him that he did not belong to this world, and he was desired to leave everything behind to find a place where he could live really comfortably. From the back, he sounded a voice that promised, "There is an essence that can help." He was a fear. He escaped with a cry, trying to understand whose voice heard, and at the same moment a strange seal with a bright glow appeared under his feet, which was even more stunned. He found himself in a completely different world, where the medieval atmosphere prevailed. Ancient houses, picturesque streets, and a majestic castle on the distant horizon created an extraordinary picture that paralyzed his mind. He simply did not find words to describe this incredible reality. Turning, he saw unusual creatures and asked aloud that he was creating and where he went. Suddenly, a voice sounded again, which explained that before him the other world was the place where he dreamed of getting. Viorito, impressed with these words, again noted the amazing of this other world. Chris once again stressed that he gave him the opportunity to go to a distant land, where he could live freely at his own choice. Dissatisfied with this explanation, he exclaimed, trying to convey to all the true meaning of his words. However, his voting attracted the attention of a large number of people who began to whisper around him. And then he realized that all this was an impossible imagination. He dreamed of another place fervently, but meeting with the other world struck him. At the same time, he was aware that he was now released from worries, from working for a dubious company and other troubles, and he finally realized that it was time to retreat from the close look of the crowd and find a shelter somewhere on the roadside. He came to him. Moving further, he will be able to come to his senses faster. Fear will not leave it until it stagnates in place, and now absolute confusion prevailed. Fredo did not know how to go home, and realized that he could not do anything about it. However, honestly, he did not want to return. Moving down the street, he looked at the space around, trying not to attract the attention of passers-by. I decided to find a place where he could live, but as soon as he looked around, realized this world was reminiscent of the game, because there were a variety of creatures nearby, from elves to strange lizards, and he realized that he had already participated in a similar game in the fantasy genre. In any case, no matter what it was for the world, the money was needed, and the real task was to search for the way and place of their acquisition. He continued his way when he realized that all the views were directed at him. His clothes caused attention. The outfit was vividly different against the backdrop of the medieval world, where such colors and silhouettes were unacceptable. The solution came instantly. It is worth selling these clothes and buying a new one that meets local standards. Fortunately, luck was on his side. He was already approaching the clothing store. Entering the store, he almost immediately met a low man with gray hair, who ran to him with passion. Smiling, he greeted the warmth, calling him a nobleman, and asked what kind of clothes he would like to buy today. The curato was surprised when he was confused with the nobleman. He explained that he wanted to sell the clothes he worn. The merchant carefully inspected the product, noting that the fabric is excellent and the work was done skillfully. However, he was aware that he was not at all versed in the monetary system of this world. When a man noticed his thoughtful look, he offered a price of 45 gold coins, but the new moon stated that he needed a little time, because he did not focus on these issues. The seller, having agreed, raised the sum to 50 gold coins and assured that no other store would be able to offer the best conditions. The guy plunged into thought again. He really hoped it. He agreed to the specified price and thanked the seller. He also asked to help with the choice of summer clothes that he planned to wear in this city, which the seller willingly agreed. Having gone outside in his updated image, he gladly noted that he had purchased only a minimal set of equipment, spending 5 silver and 5 copper coins. However, thinking, he realized that he could easily speak a new language and read perfectly. The words of this mysterious voice were again rolled in his head, reminding that Kirito has no room for anxiety, just in case he decided to check the case later. However, his reflection suddenly interrupted when someone shouted. A girl approached him and easily pulling his cape suggested buying flowers. He immediately responded with a surprised question, but was lightly coming up with a wonderful idea. It was a great opportunity that he immediately understood. He agreed to buy flowers, which caused her surprise and smile. But in reality, his idea was to ask her about something. She smiled, agreed, provided that he would first buy flowers, and then she would answer any of his questions. At the same time, in his head was the idea of what a stubborn can be like a child. He asked how much flowers cost, and the girl answered, only 2 silver coins. He stretched the coins with little hands, for which the girl thanked. Kirito smiled at her, and asked if she agreed to answer his question, to which he received the affirmative answer. In his mind, the idea was that the question was strange, and in general not too important. At that moment, the guy realized that it was impossible to address the adult with this issue. He stretched her coin and asked what value she had. The girl asked in surprise, "What is it?" And he replied that her story could help him a lot, because for him this question was a matter of life and death. Subsequently, the girl agreed and explained in detail the value of each coin. He realized how the whole world was based on the monetary system, and even managed to transfer his money to Japanese yen. According to Japan's standards, he had 494,480 yen, an amount that, although not testifying to excessive wealth, could be a good starting point for a new beginning. The girl smiled again, and asked if there was something else that he would like to find out about her. He decided to find out the name of the city where they were. The answer was unexpected. The city was called Grain, the capital of the Kingdom of Ardis. It was obvious to him that such names were unfamiliar to him, which was not surprised at all. During this time, he remembered that at 27, he was already called his uncle. He explained that he was a traveler and recently arrived in the city. The girl thought, and then suggested that if you need a job, you can try your hand at an adventure from the guild. Interested in Haridu asked what a guild was, and she told that she was assigning a task and then paying money for their completion. She explained that a man could make money by destroying a variety of monsters, and with a slight stroke of an invisible sword, reminded that her father had told her about it. Kirito noted that she apparently inherited the features from him, which she agreed. Immediately in his mind, the idea flashed. In this world he cannot afford unemployment. Joe asked her to show where the guild was, what she agreed with a smile. Walking through the narrow lanes of a small town, they reached the house on a wooden foundation, at the door of which hung a sign with the image of crossed swords. Entering the building, he saw tall men in the armor. In his thoughts, he called them unwavering. Realizing that he should behave at the same time, he was at the same time aware that the Gopnixie group was walking by the store near the store. Suddenly, we were addressed with warm, "Welcome." A creature who radiated the experience appeared in front of him, and announced, "The Guild of Adventurers at your service." It was dressed in a form decorated with the symbolism of the guild. He began to look carefully at her, guessing whether her ears were real. However, the girl immediately asked him, "What do you do?" He turned his eyes and replied that he wanted to become an adventurer, trying not to stick on her appearance because he began to explain that every adventure seeker has a rank, from S to F, which is constantly growing depending on the number of tasks. The higher the rank, the more complicated the missions, but the rewards are more respectively. Only a few seekers reach the top rank of S, which gives them a huge influence. That is why many seek to win this level, because it opens the door to tasks that come directly from the representatives of the royal family. After registration in the guild, each adventurer receives an initial rank and a starting level of skills. In the beginning, You can take the task of finding lost things, delivery or cleaning of the city. With the increase in the rank, there will be opportunities to fight monsters, collect rare materials, perform escort missions and more. Thus, over time, more and more difficult and interesting tasks will be discovered in front of you. However, if he worked as part of the group and received the approval of the guild leadership, he was able to accomplish higher rank tasks. The girl encouraged him, urging him to strive to rise. She also explained that violence, theft, and murder were strictly forbidden in the guild. Having passed through these words, Kirito realized that it was only the minimum amount of information received. Everyone explained with a smile that she had already told him all the information necessary, provided that he did not change his mind. For registration, it was necessary to pay an entrance fee of 5 silver. The guy was aware that new issues would continue to emerge, but he agreed, getting an unusual crystal. The girl asked him to put her hand. When he asked what it was, she replied that it was a crystal to preserve the information of the adventure. She explained that each guild has such areas that are used to exchange data. Fiorito found it extremely convenient, but remained interested in how they work. The girl lowered her gaze and, when she apologized, explained that she could not talk about it. What the guy himself apologized for asking unworthy questions. She asked him to extend her hand over the ball to collect all the information you need, and Purity immediately fulfilled her request. A variety of descriptions that revealed various information about him began to appear around the guy. It was reported that all the information has already appeared. The girl began to read, but as soon as she saw the name Fruity Kirito, with a slight surprise asked what was talking about. Kirito, man, rank F skill, space magic. The girl became careful about the description of this skill and could not hide her astonishment. She decided to contact the senior member of the guild. Miss Lumen explained that she had a newcomer who had a space match and asked if she was familiar with that ability. The elder, surprised, replied, "Is it not related to water, fire, and—" Appearing in the form of a beast, he apologized and asked if he needed to inform the main representative of the guild, to which the older girl answered that the chief was on a business trip. Kurito asked if she could continue the registration process. Everyone presented a token that testified that the guy officially joined the ranks of Rang F adventurers. The girl explained that when performing the task, she would be released from his duties, and in case of loss of the token, she would be obliged. Walking through the street, he decided to try his magic. Going to the nearest corner where the barrel stood, he with a sharp movement of his hand, and saying the spell instantly divided one of them into 2 parts. He reached forward and, saying the word distortion, instantly created a dark void in the barrel. He expressed his admiration for the skill of action that covers the space itself, emphasizing how amazing it is, although hinting at its potential curvature. Earlier, touching the crystal, he gained knowledge of the magic of space, although in essence real magic capable of influencing space did not exist. In fact, such force should not exist, because it could destroy everything in its path. Anyone who possesses this power can be very dangerous, although it is not a guarantee. He realized that he possesses this power through the creature that brought him here. What were her intentions when she gave him such dangerous magic and threw it into this world? However, unlike computer games, he was not entrusted with a specific mission. He remembered the words of the ability to move between places and wondered what it could mean. Standing in front of the house, he decided to show magic, imagining his roof, and asked if he could travel through the space. He immediately appeared on the roof, which caused great surprise, because in his mind he only imagined the possibility of instant teleporting. Without spending time, he decided to move to a place where the panorama from a height was striking even more, and at the same moment disappeared from the previous roof. With an unexpected movement, he found himself on the balcony of the tallest building. Sighing with relief, he confessed that although it was scary, in the end, everything was worth it. A stunning panorama, which fascinated with her grandeur, unfolded in front. His father appeared in front of his eyes. He remembered how he once advised not to be limited to labor, because life belongs to everyone, and everyone should live as he dreams. Kurito bent over, closing his eyes slightly, and to understand that there will be no skyscrapers, cars, and trains in this world, as well as places for the company he hated, and superficial, clumsy relationships. He remembered a voice that he reminded. He can go where he wants and live by his rules. It was the best choice. Looking into the distance, he decided to choose a life where he himself was the owner of his destiny. He looked tirelessly at the evening landscape, where individual houses were already glowing with lights. Most of the residents were already returning home, leaving only a few taverns echoes of songs that were heard in the distance. With regard to his father and that mysterious voice Essence, he was convinced that they were right. Use this magic to live a full and happy life. Thanks to it, he could be anywhere. His abilities reached an incredible level, and he was convinced that he found the best way to find his place in the world. Early in the morning, full of determination, he decided that his first working day had come. Arriving in the guild, he immediately took up his first task, though it was ordinary delivery. He hoped only a few tasks, but he was surprised by the news of 5 tasks. The registrar stressed that such a number of tasks is practically impossible to accomplish, and their untimely completion can lead to a fine. He was confident in his abilities, but the girl remained with her decision. He just called F, because he was forced to agree only with small tasks. In this world, everyone moved horses, but the real weight in the career was the spacious magic. Unfortunately, he was not interested in the tasks related to the destruction of the monster. Despite the power of spatial magic, not so long ago he was just a petty servant who worked with sheets of delivery. He noted that the client's house was in the southern area, while the delivery itself was carried out in the eastern. Leaving guild, the curator looked around and remembered the balcony on the high tower. Immediately moving there, he noted that the species was capturing. However, teleportation had one single drawback. Fortunately, teleportation worked only with the places he had already seen. That is why it went up higher to carefully inspect the outskirts and find a specific transfer point. However, when he was in a new location, he realized that it is always available now. It is enough to imagine it. From a height, he looked at the outskirts and immediately recognized the house that he was looking for. Imaging him clearly in his mind, he strongly went to him. Having knocked on the door, he politely greeted and introduced himself to a traveler. Brahm indicated a couple of chairs and suggested that they take them. Kirito smiled in response and nodded, and the old man wished him a good road. Then Mr. Brown approached the chairs, extended his right hand and said the spatial storage. Instantly near him, a dark circle appeared, in which he threw several chairs. He was surprised how comfortable this magic worked, and thought he considered himself a real fraud. For him, she resembled equipment in a computer game. But he decided to think later. Next to Mr. Brahms's granddaughter's house, he knocked on the door, declaring the parcel delivery. A female voice came from behind the door, which would open them in a moment. And here was a little girl with a charming face. After looking at the note, he stated that he brought 2 chairs at the request of Mr. Brahms. The girl smiled with joy, because these chairs belonged to her grandfather. She explained that the chairs were quite heavy, so she did not expect them to be delivered so quickly. However, she added that as he did not seem as strong as he could seem, that he only clumsily laughed at. She said she was incredibly rejoiced, because the delivery was extremely fast. Fiorito remembered how he took everything in the past, and his chief constantly dropped him to new tasks. It was very nice to get sincere thanks, but it was time to go on, so he said goodbye to the girl and left the place of events. A days later, having collected a considerable number of successfully completed tasks, he again visited the guild, where he was heard a variety of chats and a cheerful laughter. The girl behind the stable noticeably congratulated him, calling to approach. He instantly approached her, but forgot her name, which is why she shouted indignantly that it could be forgotten. Introducing as Kushi, she explained that Mr. Kureto's affairs were responsible and asked him to prevent such a mistake. In his mind, it flashed that she resembles the elder of the guild. He could not believe that he had coped so quickly, and therefore decided to show how his space magic works. In this world, such witchcraft has never been, but by weighing all the and against, he determined that this was the best option. The girl she explained the situation and suggested that he leave the royal capital. Shocked, Kirito asked her why he was made such an offer. She replied that he worked tirelessly and almost fulfilled all the tasks, but in her thoughts the time was already approaching when the initial rank adventurers would be left without means of existence. The guy, hearing it, smiling awkwardly. However, working outside the capital, he could accept as many orders. He was really attracted to the idea of working outside the walls of the kingdom. He remembered that the monsters who attacked people were home. Although his magical forces were no doubt powerful, little fear still covered him. The guy's reflection was interrupted by Kushi, which said that in the event of his consent, she would focus on him. In addition to increasing the payment, he promised to recommend it to raise it. With ironic laughter, she replied that the higher the rank, the greater his salary. Considering all for and against, Kirito agreed what she thanked him. Recognizing the words raising and wage increase swept in her soul, as if an explosion. Outside the capital, a majestic landscape was opened in front of him. High mountains, green meadows, and a bright sun, which was a little blinded by its rays. He noticed the only road outside the wall and moved towards the horizon. Thanks to the guild, realizing that the letter was not of great importance, and the money was brought with them a great responsibility since the task was much more complicated and required more time and physical effort, he came to the conclusion that it was most likely a test for raising the rank. The name of the village again made him think. The cool breath of the wind gently enveloped his face, and the wonderful weather created the ideal conditions for work. He looked at a wonderful landscape that opened before him, something that he had never seen in his life before. Exhaled with relief, he did not delay and moved to his goal. Using the spell of teleportation, he went on the road, realizing how faster it is compared to the trip on the carriage. However, there was one thing that he did not explain. The village of Koran was far enough, and it could take a long time. Hearing the singing of the birds, he looked up and instantly caught the opinion. The higher you will rise, the wider the review will open. So he decided to gain the height of the bird's flight, or at least try to do it. Instantly it appeared at the right height in the sky. Immediately, he realized that he had achieved the goal, but soon realized he began to fall. Without spending time, he immediately aimed at the next point in the sky and quickly headed in its direction. With a smile on his face, he made sure that the method is effective and continued his way. During the flight, he realized that he was really flying, and even sang a familiar tune. However, his singing was sharply interrupted by strange voices that did not belong to man. Lowering his gaze, he noticed several goblins, one of the main goals of the guild, which he had seen before only in stories. However, Kushi firmly assured him that there were almost no monsters on this path. So the question remains, was he really so lucky, or is she just cheating on him? He applied attacking magic exclusively to the barrel. Of course, he did not intend to fight the creatures, but the curiosity took his own, and so he decided to act. Landing next to them, he immediately attracted their attention. Green goblins with vicious facial features immediately started roaring on it. Realizing that this is a wonderful exercise, he immediately gathered when 3 goblins immediately rushed at him, roaring threateningly. Fred focused, stretching his hand forward, and said the spell of rice. 3 goblins fell to the ground, breaking into 2 parts. Other goblins did not accept this punishment. They immediately rushed to the man, shouting loudly in their goblin language. Kirito immediately said the distortion. Instantly, both goblins twisted into a spatial swirl and flew across different corners of the lawn. The guy, sighing with relief, said he had coped with them. But when his gaze stopped at the grotesque, he noticed that the longer he looks at him, the more scary and the more distorted his image looks. He realized that he had never killed a single animal before, and this caused a slight feeling of guilt. Despite the fact that the mind emphasized the absence of a moral mistake, the power of magic forced him to be sure that he was really standing in. At night, twilight, he reached the village of Koran. It is a small settlement surrounded by a brick fence, containing houses that could be listed on one hand. Although many buildings glowed from the light, the population was not enough here. Approaching the gate together with the guard, a middle-aged man with a slight bristle on his face and a spear in his hands appeared. He looked carefully at the guy and asked the traveler in surprise. In the mind of the young man, this man seemed Fry. Gran said that he understood who was in mind, and explained that since they became adventurers, they no longer returned to this village. Calling him Mr. Kurayo, he added that they regularly transfer money to support this wild area, which the interlocutor only nodded in surprise. He was a truly cheerful man. He asked his interlocutor to contact the guard with a request to accompany him to his destination. But the guard replied that he was in no hurry, because the sun was already going down, and explained that the delivery would be made tomorrow. He realized that it may seem impolite to disturb people during dinner, but it did not worry at all, because thanks to magic he could appear here the next morning. With understanding, he once again passed the terrain carefully in his imagination, carefully remembering every detail. Hugging Kirito by his shoulder, he cheerfully suggested to spend the night in himself. Kurito, surprised, tried to refuse, but the unbreakable perseverance and powerful grip of the guards forced him to agree, and therefore he asked to tell the capital of the kingdom. The guard with the boy came to a small home, decorated with flowers and plants surrounding the house. As soon as the guard penetrated the middle, he loudly invited the family to congratulate him. A young girl with a bright smile and a ponytail of blow, he smiled, saying, "Who needs it?" and laughed. The wife noted that it was a typical element of his behavior. The guy apologized and thanked the hospitality that allowed him to stay overnight. The guard explained that he should also prepare a dinner for Kurito, to which she answered that he should make him feel at home. The guy once again apologized for the inconvenience caused, darefully passed the corridor, looking carefully at the modest home. For the first time in his life, he spent the night in such a regular house of this world. Walking past the stairs to the second floor, he heard a joyful exclamation. His father returned home, and the question of a new client immediately flew to him. From the stairs, a girl with big green eyes and blonde hair, tied into a small ponytail, appeared. She was dressed in an elegant dress that perfectly emphasized the shade of her eyes, and on her neck a gently tied scarf added an image of a special highlight. The daughter of Andres, a Nina, was presented in Churito. He took a place in front of her, sincerely stating that he was extremely happy. He also said that he was an adventure seeker, and her careful father allowed her to spend the night with them. Smiling with sincerity, Nina replied that she was very honored to get acquainted with him. Churito thought she was sweet and easy to communicate, but suddenly they turned to him. He grabbed Chirino by his shoulder and strictly warned him, "I do not dare even to touch any of my daughter." Surprised and intimidated, the young man immediately asked to let him go. However, instantly grabbed him by his ear, and he soon got in pain. Stella demanded that he stop chatting and immediately helped her in the kitchen, answering such sharp words that he immediately understood their meaning. At that moment, his wife's limitless power broke out in his mind. My father returned to his daughter and informed that Kurito had arrived from the royal capital, to which the girl looked at him in surprise. Bright light shone in her eyes. She looked at the boy in surprisely and asked again about the royal capital. She joyfully started jumping around him, immersed in delight. Indeed, did he arrive from the royal capital? Emphasizing this, she added that it was incredible, and that he probably had many exciting stories. The guy could barely collect thoughts from surprise when a loud replica came from behind, asking, "All right?" His wife appeared behind him, who reported that the villagers listened to the traveler's stories with great interest. He was also asked to allow him to communicate with their daughter, a request that a man agreed, thinking about the features of this world. It is invited to squat at a table where it laid out a variety of dishes that attracted not only their beautiful appearance, but also aroma. The guy with the girl could no longer hold back their admiration, watching that appetizing. The father cautiously brought a bottle of wine and offered it Kurito, who agreed to taste, but only if it would not be too strong. Andre assured him that there was no reason to excite. He was served with a glass that cautiously poured a rich burgundy shade with a pleasant aroma. He paid attention how nice, without excess acid, the aroma of wine sounded. Andre asked if he was familiar with the art of winemaking. He replied that winemakers in their village are extremely whims, so their wine is the best. The guy nodded clearly. They breathed in glasses, celebrating their health, and enjoyed the first sip of wine. Kurito was enthusiastically noted that it has an extremely rich taste that his father Nina immediately confirmed. The daughter offered to taste the salad, because the vegetables for him were fresh, directly from the garden, which added a special taste. Stella encouraged him not to be ashamed, emphasizing that the food would be enough for everyone. Kurito looked at her and thanked her, smiling. Having tried the cooked food, he noted her unsurpassed taste and emphasized that Stella was a real culinary craftsman. She gently thanked him, and Marie added that her culinary skills were the best in the world. Dao remembered his mother, who departed too early. He really liked the atmosphere of this house. Andre noticed the thought on his face and asked that he was disturbing. But Dao replied that everything was fine, and added how great to have his own cell. Smiling, he suggested that the boy try on his own, advising to stop the extra adventure and move to their village. He also promised to teach him the art of hunting, which the guy just smiled gently. He thoughtfully contemplated how harmoniously and calmly lives in this corner. because a deep night was already decomposed above the village. In the morning, Fredo will renew his mission in these parts. To fill his pages, Fadi Kurito was moved to another world by a mysterious creature. Thanks to space magic, he began to perform unexpected tasks until he settled with his family in the village of Koran. The morning was just beginning to blossom. The first sunlight gently penetrated through the windows of the houses, pouring on a soft pillow in which the guy dreamed of his past life. However, an unexpected blow to someone's legs quickly returned him to reality. Nina, who slept much stronger than he woke up. He quickly dressed and descended to the ground floor. In the kitchen, he was already met by a smiling Stella, which joyfully congratulated him on a good morning. He confessed that he got a good sleep, which Kirito smiled warmly and nodded, gratefully accepting the pajamas she brought him. With a slight laughter, she apologized for the extraordinary elasticity of this outfit. He asked if her daughter had fallen asleep, but he received the answer, that the baby was sleeping peacefully, and she did not want to wake her up. She further explained that there were no peers in the village, because the youth rushed to the capita. A man appeared behind his back, clearly affected by the default, and asked who was so worried at all. He replied that Nina was his only daughter, and therefore his anxiety was clear. Kirito politely wished him a good morning, for which he received a mutual greeting. Rei again asked if he did not allow something wrong, to which Kirito, with a clear surprise, replied that nothing had happened. Stella added that he went out for a half-hour examination every day, so unnecessary questions were unnecessary. Then she took them out with the words that breakfast was ready and waited on the table. Kirito glanced at her back and was unexpectedly surprised. A delicious breakfast was waiting on the table. Toast with eggs and fresh vegetables that harmoniously complemented each other. Fiorito, seeing such a deliciousness, immediately rushed to wash. From the outside, the sun was already in the sky, and a light breeze drove dust on the road. After breakfast, Andrew and Kirito came out to meet the new day. The guy had to deliver a letter with money at the address where Andrew promised to take him away. He thoughtfully admired the terrain that impressed with his silence and peace, as if he remembered his world again, which is not surprising, because he felt hopeless. He didn't feel like he wanted to be there. People do not realize that this boredom can become acceptable to them if you think carefully. Kurito broke out different opinions. He wondered how much time has passed since its appearance in this world. Only today managed to finally enjoy a real night's holiday. In memory, the memories of yesterday, when Nina was surprised, noted that there were so many different races in the capital. He himself added that it also seems extremely amazing to him. She asked him to tell something else, but he just sighed and stated that he knew nothing more than he could say. Her surprised view was silently appreciated his answer. He then confessed that he intended to become a real killer, and added that he recently found himself in the capital. However, he immediately asked the question, where did he come from? Freya was surprised by such a surprise. The guy explained that his home is located quite far, which creates some inconvenience. But he considered it the best option for himself. Nina was amazed by learning about these difficulties associated with a long distance. The girl smiled and reported that he was now waiting for many exciting adventures. At first, Kurito was surprised, but later looked at her with a gentle smile and nodded approvedly. In his cozy home, Andrew announced that they were here and pointed to Greg, who was in Taylor's house. Greg, a little surprised, asked if they were really neighbors, which received a sarcastic answer that they were a wonderful couple. After heading to Andrew's house, he said that she was calling his family, to which Kirito nodded in his agreement. The company appeared in front of Kirito. One man introduced himself to the father of Greg, and the woman, Mother Taylor. Also, another man greeted, saying that he was an adventurer named Kirito, and sincerely wished everyone a good morning. He stretched out a small bag, saying that he had brought delivery for them. They delayed for a moment, asking if there was money in it, which the man confirmed it. She noted that she was surprised, because only letters were arrived. The man replied that perhaps the letter contained the necessary information, and they came to the conclusion that the essence of the message was revealed directly in it. In addition, it was noted that although a man is an adventurer of Rant F, the guild still trusts him. He learned in surprise that the case had touched him, and answered yes. He was explained that he was recommended by guild, which is why he decided to transfer the funds. One lifted his eyebrows and stated that we probably deal with a test of lice. Kurito asked what this test means, but the interlocutor did not want to give an explanation and suggested checking whether the entire amount was transferred. To which he was answered that, according to all calculations and the content of letters, the funds were completely transferred. The men expressed gratitude for having overcome such a distance and asked them to give them hello if they happened to meet their stupid sons. He looked at them. He nodded in return. Staying outside the house, Andrew asked if he had managed to complete the task. He received an affirmative answer, supported by gratitude for the assistance provided. Andrew was then interested when the man It was clear that he did not like the news of Kurito's return. However, he admitted that he would like to stay a little. Unfortunately, because of the unstable financial condition, he was forced to give up this desire. The girl nodded gently and reached out, inviting him to return the next time, to which Kurito responded with a confirmatory nod. In response, she reached out. Andre, approaching the man, strictly warned him not to think about doing something to her, which he assured that he had no such intention. He then decided to check whether they understood the age difference and asked him. He was surprised to say that this guy, younger than him, only 1 year, to which Kirito said, "Andre 28, so why did you perceive him if he were your age?" He further explained that he always considered Andre to be much older, even calling him an old man. Hearing this, the man fell silent from shock and surprise, and then replied that it was extremely impolite. He assured his parents that, as if their daughter was not, he was absolutely not prone to temptations on her part, for which he sincerely apologized. However, this statement was not true to Andre, because sometimes the Japanese can really look much younger than their age. Stella turned to Kurito and suggested that he take her food if she liked so much that he was clearly surprised by the boy. She also noted that there were several dishes from yesterday, and shared them with them. To be sure that it is not hungry, he thanked her for the food. Leaving home, she turned to them, and once again expressed gratitude for their support. The joyful Nina said goodbye, waving her hand, and Andre said that the next time he would stay with them if such a need arises. Tierto also said goodbye, waving them goodbye when they walked. Walking through the road, he remembered how the soap treated a stranger adventurist, and realized that these people were really extraordinary. The time spent with them gave him a sense of comfort, as if he had gone to their family. He realized that if life was preserved in the same variety, again, there would be no difficulty for him. After leaning and reaching out to the sky, he realized that it was time to return to the guild to surrender. He was filled with joy from the realization that he found a place where he always welcomes him again. After saying goodbye to his family who invited him at night, he left the village of Horin. Here he was successfully raised in rank, which brought a number of advantages. First, the list and number of tasks he could perform, so saved. Secondly, the reward increased for the execution of quests, and he soon began to earn more than all other adventures. His reflection was suddenly interrupted by an unfamiliar voice appearance. A group of men with various injuries appeared in front of him. One of them turned to Kurito, because he could not understand what tricks he had so many tasks. He believed that a real adventure should make money on combat quests, but this approach damaged his reputation. In amazement, he asked if there was a rule that obliged to take the task of destroying monsters, which they answered that it did not matter. People like Kurito usually hang out near easy tasks. He thought hard how to act in such a situation, because arguing with such a person was in vain. Remembering the words of Kushi, he realized that the guild was strictly forbidden in the guilt and involvement in conflicts. To avoid them, he realized that he would have to enter the building. However, in his way, a man who was twice as big as Kurito stood. He asked where he was going, reminding that the conversation was not yet completed. Meanwhile, people began to notice how a fight unfolded around. A crowd gathered around them. Some discussed a fight loudly, others boldly put on the winner. Kurito realized that he was waiting for an incredible sight. Although the quarrels did not rarely happen, he has already seen such scenes during the tasks. It was now that the scales, where both participants competed for the title of the best. The Shadow was already thinking about joining a guild or escape, although both options would not solve its problem. It was obvious that in the ordinary battle it would not cope, and the use of the type of Cuther's curvature under publicity was unacceptable. However, a brilliant idea came to him unexpectedly. With a number of people, his performance against opponents could be a great advertisement. It was then that the opportunity to raise earnings to a new level was opened. He recited his demonstration aloud, but two came to him, asking that he was inadvertently murmured. Kurito sharply noted that this was not their business. He stated that he would act at his own discretion and will not fit under their demands. In addition, he added, "If you don't like it, try to convince me to change your mind." His words had a great influence on the boys, and they, filled with malice, said that they would do, if he thinks, they would just hit him. With the feeling, as if he were already in flight, he smiled and asked if he could continue the conversation. However, these guys climbed to the sky with him, leaving everyone stunned and puzzled. Recalling that he could not stay in the sky for a long time, they began to fall. Boys covered with fear shouted that every moment could turn into a tiny puddle. In the meantime, Kurito maintained full calmness, because he was responsible for this process. One of the masked, frightened and impressed, asked why he was so cold-blooded. Continuing to rage, they decided to ask him if he really did it. He calmly confirmed his guilt and added that when they fall from such a height, they could turn into a cake. After that, surprised to ask whether they intended to kill them, they desperately believed him to refrain from this step. Flying closer to the ground, they apologized and asked for a pardon. He exhaled, thinking that their determination had weakened. However, he eventually regretted them. They laid gently, receiving only minor scratches and bruises. The surrounding people were surprised to ask what caused their unusual return, because no one has met such magic yet. Standing before the assembly, he began to explain that his magic allows you to move immediately over long distances. The crowd asked the question, why he opened this ability, because for the first time it sounded for someone. To which he replied that he had an idea that would greatly simplify their travels. If the destination is within its capabilities, it will easily deliver them there. His main earnings were to deliver adventure for tasks and make a fee. In the world where modern transport is absent, the demand for such services was very high. In addition, he could earn even more directly. He assured everyone that this proposal would bring mutual benefit. The residents of the area listened to his words thoughtfully, but could not fully understand the essence of the conversation. For the first time they were faced with a similar approach and hesitated whether it would fail. Suddenly, one of the attendees proclaimed the phrase, causing an instant surprised assessment by the narrator. A girl approached him, asking what benefit it could bring them. He thought, because someone really showed interest, he explained that they will save time, and he will be able to earn, delivering them to their destination. The girl was interested in the price, to which he answered that the cost would be determined depending on the distance traveled. For the first customer, he set the cost of the service, 2 silver coins for transportation of the group to the mission. The girl delayed and stated that it was too high. He thought, of course, his service would cost more than a regular carriage, because in the latter case, they were returned 2 more copper coins, which complicated the belief that the price could be higher for them. The middle-height man left the crowd and reported that the Gromov sword group would like to know more, unless it is inconvenience. He smiled and stated that he fully supported the idea. However, the girl could not stand and asked him for what purpose they conceived. She called him genius, but his doubts remained, and he continued to consider the situation. He addressed the girl and noted that if the truth is, thanks to the abilities of this guy, their progress can make a significant leap forward. After revealing his considerations, he suggested going to another place, because it is not advisable to discuss such things in the middle of the crowd. He introduced himself as Kuruto, a tall man with several scars, who called himself Stone. The leader of the Thundersword team was Alina, a girl who was the first to leave the crowd. She strictly warned him, if he had deceived them, she would not delay his life. Then she met the young girl with a stick carefully, calling Arna. He was called a family, and he said with a smile that it was time to go to business. However, he was stopped by Alina, asking why they need jumps. He replied that everything is very simple. He explained that if Kuruto had sent them to their destination, they could do a lot of tasks with minimal cost. However, when they learned the price offered by Kuruto, they were surprised. Only 2 silver coins were sufficient for that. He continued his story. First, these people are always traveling with riding or carriages. If you calculate all the costs, only 2 silver coins are obtained. However, when something went wrong, the costs are increasing. Besides, he added that he continued to explain that if they invest a little silver in movement, it would save time and effort. Thanks to this, they will be able to perform several highly profitable tasks daily. The more tasks, the more income. In addition, you do not have to worry about the attack of monsters on the way, which significantly reduces the load. The members of the group were clearly nodding. She laid her hand on his shoulder and smiled for her arrogance. In his mind, something like a surprise has passed how quickly she changed his shoes. The genius explained that you need to make more money until other adventurers have learned about their. From the corner, a medium-sized face with white hair and a cloak of the same color suddenly appeared. She was extremely interested in magic that can be moved freely. He spent time for a cup of tea in a cozy small coffee shop, enjoying the Miyatu's rest. Suddenly, his gaze fell on the hourglass, and he realized that it was time to go back to the guys from the mission. Due to the will of the mysterious essence of Fad Kurito, suddenly moved to another world. With the help of space magic, he became an adventure seeker and received an invitation to join the Groma group that went from the royal capital to the goal. Kurito hoped that everything was fine with the group and no one suffered damage. However, just a few hours before, the group was stunned as they were instantly here, in just 1 second. The genius noted that under the normal conditions of overcoming this path, they would take a whole 3 days. Whacken. Fuei Tito confessed that he had already visited the Cal's plane in business. As already explained, his magic could only be transferred to familiar places, so the further he went, the larger the fee should be paid. The genius corrected glasses and agreed without hesitation, because the speed prevailed. Make sure it really favor. He said he would return to the capital, drink a cup of tea and wait for them. The boys, except Reed, were stunned, and the genius looked just surprised. They denied, stressed that we would fight, to sweat, and he would only sit and enjoy tea instead. It seemed to everyone that it was an extremely cunning plan. Fredo added that this was his ability, however. If he went with them, it would only be a hindrance. The opinion that everyone agreed with. She hid behind the boys' back, wished them good luck. Alina, as if shocked, explained that she decided to escape, and immediately grabbed one of the girls, drawing her behind her. Judging by how Arna was proud of the letter T, she sought T too. Next, it was stated that they were taken after about 2 hours. Kurito, smiling, nodded and warned, "Be careful." He approached the boys, and even before he had time to say that he had returned, then he was instantly near his throat. To his horror, Alina realized that he was he, and retreated from him. Kurito asked her what had happened, explaining that he almost had a heart attack. However, she accused him, pointing to his sudden appearance, which scared her. He decided that in the future it was necessary to retreat a little. He also became interested in hunting the monster, which heard the assurance that everything happened well. He noted that everything went successfully, pointing to the stones on which he sat, and a stunned monster. This is exactly what he expected from the adventures of B, ranking B. Considering the parchment, he decided to move to the next trip. However, the genius interrupted him to ask his question. What if they could leave their luggage for storage, of course, for the appropriate fee? Behind Reed, a girl named Arna asked her to take her home. It is such a step that would allow you to collect even more material. Tirito thought about the office. Riado realized that the more tasks they performed, the more materials they accumulated, and therefore their luggage became larger. That is why the storage system for adventure seekers could be incredibly convenient and profitable. Purito agreed, saying that the service would cost 3 bronze coins, and the genius confirmed that it would greatly help them. One of the guys asked to give a small bag of standard size. His surprise was instant, and he immediately promised that the bag would be given. Using the magic of space, he created a storage facility for them, declaring it ready for storage of materials. Lena and Arna's face was surprised, and they asked how it could be possible. Kirito turned to them, wondering what was the matter, because they clearly recognized his amazing abilities, even if his magic seemed too powerful. Without spending time, the boys suggested going to the next task in the Galore Forest. A journey to the Galore Forest, which would usually reach 4 days on a carriage, flew like an instant outbreak. The Thunderswords group returned to the capital of the same day, completing 2 missions at once, an action that seemed impossible. He apologized, because at first he doubted his abilities, but they were just as promised. The whole company smiled because of his kindness, and realized that such a reliable person would be a great compliment to the team. Rox proposed to invite him to the group that Alina considered it a great idea, but Kurito refused. explaining that he did not intend to stay as an adventurer for a long time. He also stated that he was always ready to use his skills for help when needed. Its first customers were those who contributed to the financing of the sword, and a discount was provided for them. He nodded with a warm smile and understanding. Only a moment, and the girl struck the boy, sharply ordered not to mention the incident. Her satisfied face, as if saying herself for herself, caused a moan of pain even in stones. Everyone agreed to continue working with Kurito. There were already whispers around that the return from the task has become too fast. They say to deserve the name, first you need to get a reputation. A few weeks have passed since his new job. Those who doubted the capabilities of Kurito began to approach him alone. The number of customers has increased steadily, stabilizing its earnings. He soon called his services transfer and service, although he did not suspect what he would turn to. When he entered the guild building, a Kush ran to him, and with his dissatisfaction, reported that it was through him that the guild was in a very extreme condition. The guy did not expect anything, but Kushi was given another girl, and he asked her no longer to call him that name. The girl insisted that the second name indicates the possibility of the adventure. However, Miss Kushi did not share such a look, and did her best to move away from the situation as soon as possible. However, the girl still released and approached him, insisting on the need to slow down the transmission of adventures. Due to the huge demand and the frantic pace of tasks, which did not allow you to process requests in time, the situation became tense. Meanwhile, the other day, the head of the guild approached Kurito, noting his outstanding efficiency and thanking for his work. However, the girl was dissatisfied, and expressing her protest, strikingly struck his fist on the counter. The head continued the conversation. She insisted that everything he told her would be forgotten, because this elderly man rarely appeared in the guild and constantly evaded her duties. In addition, she appealed to Mr. Kurito, demanding to listen care. He could not force Kushi and others to work on the verge of power, because he himself was well aware of how much a corporate slave cost. It has always been obvious that his magical power had its limits. After numerous transfer of groups of people an extremely interesting figure appeared in front of him. He politely greeted her, and at that moment, Kirito mentioned that she was reminiscent of one of the Hollywood actors. After the nod, he asked who before him and apologized for his previously inappropriate behavior. He introduced himself as Emilio, a merchant who was doing the royal capital. Next to him was his employee named Rodi. Fiorito set out his requirements, after which Emilio, without spending time, offered partnership. In the shock, Purity was without the appropriate words. He apologized, saying that he was not such, and he is not interested in such topics, so you should not impose your point of view. The shocked guy specified that the partnership meant a completely different. Fioritis sighed with relief, recognizing he has long appreciated his strength and even noted how instantly got to the surprise, although a regular trip could take about a week and a half. According to him, using your ability to buy and sell goods, you can easily make a profit. However, he probably came to this conclusion. He seems to be familiar with Kurito's personality in detail. He radiated the impression of a careful person, which itself became a confirmation of his intention to earn this method. Satisfied, Emilio smiled, noting how it greatly simplifies all the cases, and for the second time raised the issue of his proposal. However, Kurito tried to conquer him. In the end, he decided to find out the name of the company, which Emilio nodded, called it. It seemed that Kurito had already brought everything out. The company was called Emilio, and he was its leader. The interlocutor apologized to explaining that he had never heard of such an organization before. Emilio asked if he visited the capital of the capital. Kurito confirmed that yes, and even planned to offer his services there, but he crossed his hands and noted that it was visible from his face. Kurito, surprised, noted that it is quite sharply. It was not strange that he did not hear about his company, because it was created recently. He decided to clarify that he was probably upset by her young age. The interlocutor explained that he would join a larger firm, which received only a brief confirmation. He confirmed that the situation was not bad, but not optimal. In addition, he warned, working in a large company can be a bad choice. Kurito looked at him in surprise and asked what reason it was, and then the latter gave a detailed explanation. For him, participation in a large company was an extra burden. The larger the organization, the more obligations imposed on it, and the profit was divided between many. He explained that he had never joined any group because of fear of losing his own freedom. Instead, he chose the path of the mercenary he called the transportation service. He realized that being only a small gear in the mechanism of a large organization is not for him. Kurito thought, "Who is this man?" He followed him. Continuing to listen to Emilio, the guy learned that the latter's company was significantly advanced in this case, although only 2 employees now work in it. Emilio assured that he would not force him to work. "Everything will happen." He handed him a bag of 50 gold coins. Chirito thought about how a small house in the capital can be built from this amount, because not everyone was given such a financial opportunity. However, it was obvious that Emilio was in silence. Although Chirito stated that he had his own means for the purchase of goods, Emilio specified that it was only an advance in the event of its offer, and he did not expect such a huge monthly amount. He was even more surprised when he learned that it was a daily payment. Emilio explained that this is all that he can count on. The volumes were quite modest. However, over time, the scale will increase, and with it income. Senti asked if he was confident in his proposal, which he received the affirmative answer. He was convinced that thanks to Kuritos, his profits would grow much more. In response, he demonstrably accepted a complacent pose, and the roadie clasped his palms. In his thoughts, the young man noted with what boundless faith he was trusted. However, Kuritos's reflection unexpectedly interrupted Emilio, who asked if he was ready for cooperation. He realized that in the event of Emilio failure would not risk, because the proposal seemed very attractive to him. It may be worth starting with small, gradually developing the company. In addition, a man named Emilio showed great interest in him. He agreed to it, stretching his hand for handshakes. Emilio suggested switching to you, and, without hesitation, he accepted his proposal, after which both shook his hands. Now everything has become official. Leaving the house, Kurito noticed Emilio, which carries the boxes. Kurito met him with a sincere morning greeting and asked if he was ready to proceed to business, which he nodded positively. He also turned from good morning to Rodney, although he only answered a short nod. Emilio warned not should be taken by Roddy's indifference too seriously, because he is very shy. Then Emilio decided to find out if he managed to sleep well at night, and Kurito replied that the dream was wonderful. He noted that the store was absolutely empty, to which Emilio replied that he had just purchased it. However, it will soon be filled with the edges, and even other stores will not be able to compete with it. Turururis felt doubts about this situation. Emilio, addressing the boy, wanted to clarify some question. He asked what he wanted to know, and then went to discuss his abilities. He asked if his magic was imposed by the restriction and how far it could move. He heard about the presence of a magical storage and sought to observe it in action. This approach would allow him to clearly determine where to direct his business resources. Kureto could not understand what the interlocutor wanted to know, because he explained everything in detail. He noted that he conducted a similar study, and was aware of all the nuances of his abilities. Emilio carefully recorded in a notebook that the Kuru was able to move anywhere in the world. Realizing that the question was superfluous, since the answer was already known, he did not stop and asked to show his repository, what the Kuretod agreed without hesitation. Instantly, with a slight movement of the hand, a huge black portal emerged next to them. Interesting, the man decided to clarify whether his goods were damaged during such storage, because in his memory, there was a reassurance of Kurito about the Saf. In the mind, Chehatos was instantly born. He already understood how to maximize profit, which indicates the severity of his thinking. Emilio persistently stated that the goods should be delivered to its storage as soon as possible. However, seeing Ti, instantly Kuruto loads all the cart to his repository, which was incredibly impressed by Emilio and Rodney. He assures that everything under control and movement will go without any difficulty. However, at some point Emilio went, but not as used. He was shocked, openly expressing his surprise, and Emilio, wiping tears, apologized for his laughter. He also noted that the magic was truly impressed, and added that he was not in vain approached by the interlocutor. Thardo realized that this laughter had had little intentions. Emilio explained that his magic is perfect for transportation. It was extremely surprised at this and expressed his denial immediately. Emilia, having discouraged, stated that it was just a joke, because even without such risk, you can make solid money. Purito asked him not to joke in such a tone. Hearing the confirmation of understanding, he suggested that he or she has already started work. The darkness of the Donver was scattered over the green fields. The joyful Emilio could not believe that they were instantly in this place. In his thoughts, Kurita asked himself if he had tired of responding so emotionally to everything. One guy asked the question of what purpose they arrived here, to which he answered that he had already understood, because he was before. The guy also noted that it was only about work. Finding himself next to the border of a Matic country famous for turbulent trade, he decided to clarify the situation. Having learned about the range of products of this country, he asked if the interlocutor was familiar with its main deliveries. They wondered what the difference in price arose. Emilio explained that there are many mountains and various unwanted monsters on the side of the royal capital. That is why traders and travelers deliberately avoid this village. Strange, but almost no one knows about it. In addition, merchants prefer payment of duties and a direct route to Madden, so that they do not come here. The guy understood the essence of his words and nodded in agreement. For the last time when he delivered a letter, it did not go unnoticed, because Emilio knows many things that ordinary people do not even know about, and it was a little scared of Kurito. However, he explained that their strategy was to buy rare goods at a low price, and then sell them where they were scarce. Emilio replied, "Buy cheap, sell expensive. That's the whole essence of business." However, it was difficult to implement this principle. The man noticed that Kurito looked at him with surprise. Smiling, he noted that with his magic everything would be much easier. Emilio waved his hand and suggested in a hurry with shopping, as the local market is not equal in size to Madith. Upon completion of trade, they will go to another place. Kurito felt that many things were waiting in front of him. This is how their business meetings have developed. The beginning of the trading company, as promised by Emilio, demanded from him travel throughout the country to places where food, handicrafts, textiles, medicines, and even unique materials of monsters were sold. Kurito bought specialized goods In 3 months, the store has succeeded in the royal capital. The building has undergone a real transformation. Dust corners and spiderweb finally disappeared, and each of its angle was shining with incredible cleanliness and brilliance. Walking through the city, he reflected on a wonderful achievement. In 3 months they managed to achieve such a result, despite more employees. It was especially pleased that only a few employees knew about his involvement. Recently, the company the man sitting at the table and thoughtfully reviewing the documents without lifting his eyes, warmly met the guest, turning to him by his name. Fueguitito stated that he brought the goods obtained by Mr. Zarm, and the interlocutor asked him to place them in the store. He carefully staged all the goods, noting that such a case could only be done in a volcano of cycling. Emilio, having tapped a pile of papers on the table, stated that without the help of the new moon could not do. However, he replied that he clearly stated that everything was completed and that his cash award was ready for payment. Purito looked at him wary and asked if he was overloaded. He explained that he still largely depends on Purito, which is contrary to his promise not to attach him too much. Purito immediately understood the situation and noted, "I asked for freedom, but it is not necessary to overdo it with load." Smiling, Emilio asked if he was ready to spend all his life while working on the company. Fiorito, surprised, asked, "When did you mention it?" The interlocutor replied, "It is a pity, because you didn't plan to devote to her all her life." He became convinced in Purat inside. Of course, he did not have such intention. Suddenly, Emilio thought about hearing. He decided to find out if he managed to accumulate enough, because the company's profits were growing every day. However, instead of a high salary, he chose the path of a peaceful life, which for a moment made Kurito think. Reato was silent. He had no words. Emilio noted that the decision remains him, but he had a clear goal: to make the company the best in the world, and it would be incredibly happy if Kurito joins this plan. In the evening, some city streets sparkled life with numerous pubs. Kurito, bypassing shops and houses, thought about talking to Emilio. Something in his behavior did not give him rest. Remember, as once, when he came into another world, he sailed downstream without thinking about the future. Its only purpose was to make money, and over time he forgot about primary hopes, because his real goal was completely different. He was fully immersed in his thoughts when he accidentally hit the shoulder of a random passerby and immediately apologized. Realizing that it was necessary to rethink everything, he decided not to do it in a noisy pub or cafe, but to find a quiet place where no one would interfere. Lifting his eyes, he noticed a majestic tower with a cozy balcony. The view of this balcony, which was so fascinated, did not let him be delayed. He immediately went to him. At the same time, memory was sleeping. How much time has passed since it was here? Since the first day of his existence in this world. Remembering the words of a creature about the use of magic, he smiled, watching the easy movement of life on the night streets. Looking back, he was aware that his work in the guild or in the transportation service was much better than it seemed. It was here that he met many wonderful people. And even Emilio, though he had his eccentricity, had a great talent, and, as a chief, was perfect. Kodo could not say that he did not like his current work at all, but in the past, he did not seek to establish a close relationship with people. Having lost his mother at an early age, he always feared the repetition of the tragedy, and deliberately kept the distance from loved ones. However, when his father died later, he realized that he had remained lonely, deprived of a warm relationship. He was aware that he was now much better than ever, although Emilio's relationship was still exclusively business. Thoughts about true friends and deep human connections filled his mind. This city has caused warm memories of the house, a place where you can feel real peace and comfort. For example, Nina, the daughter of that guard, appeared in front of him. He remembered how she asked if he would return again. The moments made with that family came to life in his memory. The farewell that warmed his soul became of particular importance. In a village, called Mountains, a family who dreamed of seeing him again gradually came to life in his memory with vivid memories of that evening. The room was filled with a joyous atmosphere. People cheerfully chatted, shared jokes, and laughed, creating a unique feeling of holiday. He realized that he's seeking to settle in the village of Goran and did not mind leading a peaceful life there. However, could he part with Emilio? The help of Kuritos remained indispensable, if only possible. He was struck by the discovery that thanks to the magic of space, he could be both in the village and the royal capital at the same time. He realized that life was waiting for him, divided between the two worlds. Tired of loneliness, he sought happiness, appreciating human connections and enjoying every moment. However, he knew that the granted force was not based on the opportunity to lead such a life, and therefore decidedly made his decision. The idea of living on two bases and traveling with magic has become the highlight that he was so lacking. He finally found a way of life he always dreamed of. In fact, Food Kurito mastered spatial magic, which allowed him to move freely due to her power. That is why he decided to lead a double way of life, to earn in the majestic royal capital and to relax in a picturesque rural area. Today's weather pleased with its beauty, and on the main street there was a wonderful singing. It was a children's voice that he was blowing his tune in the spring area, collecting flowers and weaves a wreath from them. A familiar silhouette appeared on the road, a girl who, despite the absence of one leg, steadily stepped forward. He waved his hand, smiling and saying hello. However, the girl looked at him in surprise without recognizing. He carefully asked if she remembered him, because he had previously visited the village. He recalled how they had dinner together, and he spent the night here, and also remembered how she was interested in stories about the royal capital. The girl was still surprised, and the man, putting a sad look, was quietly upset that she did not recognize him. However, recognizing him, she instantly engulfed joy and started jumping fun around, in surprise asking what he was doing here, or again because of work. At the same time, she was interested in how he had, and suggested that she spend the night together again. This made Kuritos sigh with relief. He lay on the grass and said quietly, "Thank God." Nina, noticing him, immediately asked if everything was fine. He confirmed it and explained that he had previously been here and feared that he had been forgotten. Nina loudly assured him that she would never forget. Smiling, he replied that even her father Andre had not forgotten. In fact, he was only worried that they would forget him, and Nina added that it would never happen. She called the day of his arrival special, and remembered with a smile how incredibly fun she was. She thanked Kurito for keeping his promises and visiting them again. She replied that she should thank. When they reached the house, they were waiting for their mother in the courtyard, Stella, who was pleasantly surprised to find out about his return. Kurito smiled and greeted her warmly, noting how they had not met for a long time. In response, she gladly said that she was happy to see him again. His repertoire included the phrase he spoke, pointing to his wife, reminding that he told her, but she did not believe him. Stella quietly lowered her gaze and stated that there was no work in their village. The new moon just left. Andre asked if he watched all this with a smile, feeling the warmth and cozy atmosphere. Stella asked Andre to ask if his absence of problems would create as he left his post. He confidently replied to this that at the beginning of his place, another security guard, realizing that his replacement would be long-lasting. He felt that he was not being affected in this village. Andre asked what he was doing here, or perhaps again went for a double delivery task, but Kirito refused that idea. He announced that he had settled here, which caused surprised views and questions on their part. Andre immediately noted that this is a wonderful news. Now they would be able to go fishing together, and Nino was delighted with the idea that she would be able to play next to him every day. Kirito did not assume such sincere hospitality, and Stella asked his father and his daughter to calm down a little. She confessed that she was happy about it, but explained in detail that in his work was wrong. Andrew joined the conversation, noting that although the style of clothing coincided, the quality of the fabric was much higher, and asked about his business. Stella and Andre was surprised. With a slight doubt they looked at him. Kirito calmly explained that he understands their distrust, but added that although it seems incredible, his magic will allow him to work freely in the capital. According to him, thanks to this ability, he will be able to stay in two places at the same time. Andre noted that there was no instant movement, which Kirito, smiling, replied that in his case it was possible. He tried to reassure him, saying that he had not heard anything like this before. However, the man replied that in his case it is not surprising. He suggested clearly showing his capabilities, which caused the surprised views of Andre and Stella. He then announced that he could take them to the royal capital. Nina immediately supported this idea, and Andre, smiling, said that he had got drunk with only one glass of wine. They were already in the middle of the royal capital. The surprise that they swept it was incredible. They both felt a crazy horror and shock at the same time. Stunned, he exclaimed from surprise, unable to believe what was happening and how it could have happened. Stella lifted her gaze and saw the majestic towers of the castle of Zeril. She took a deep breath and then slowly exhaled, realizing that the royal capital was really revealed before her. Her eyes shone, and she could hardly believe her eyes, shouting that it was an incredible and real royal capital. Nina was constantly smiling, enthusiastically noting how huge the buildings were and how many people gathered here. Kirito thought about, when he was at home, the man instantly set up every corner shouting, "House! Sweet house!" Nino asked why they returned so quickly, because she was just starting to enjoy the moment. Kirito apologized and promised that next time he would provide her. His father explained the guy that he planned to live in two places at the same time, and added that it was a wonderful idea, though he promises to be extremely costly. Kirito calmly noted that financial costs are not a problem because he earns well. Andres, unable to withstand curiosity, asked what the city spell means, after which he sighed and stated that I would be glad to be happy in this case. Nina and Kirito looked at him in surprise. Anne sincerely congratulated him, inviting him to the Rig village, and expressed his hope for peaceful coexistence. He suggested that in the event of any difficulty, you can always turn to it for help. Stella noted that this was a reason to celebrate. He agreed with a widely smiling face, noting that he would like their lives to continue in the same way. And then another day, filled with a warm family atmosphere. The house enveloped in a friendly harmony, and Kirito felt happiness, because it had a place for a small, though not his own, family. In previous chapters, it was told that thanks to this magic, it is possible to live both in cozy rural areas and in the luxurious capital. After the loss of the last relative and the alignment in complete loneliness, Kirito is transferred to another W. He went out into the yard, where a light, cool blow gently cooled his face, and barely waking up, drove from a sleepy Delus. However, he quickly realized that he had gone with alcohol last night. The sky reflected the inner state of Kirito, and the weather on the street remained wonderful. He realized that fresh air and wonderful landscapes were inspiring, and realized why he chose this village for settlement. Life in a completely different world allowed him to finally relax, and this choice was the best that happened in his life. Enjo, wishing each other a good morning, she asked what plans for this day, to which the guy replied that he had not yet decided. Nina suggested to enjoy the sakura blossoms or stroll along the stream. Kirito thought for a moment when her father appeared from the house, looking as if he had knocked him down. Kirito gazed him gently, and Nina did not resist what had happened. Andrew explained that they stood too close to each other and realized that it was time to look for housing for themselves. I decided to find out a man how to find a home in this village. Andre, embarrassed, asked the question once again, as if not understanding the answer. He explained that citizenship needs to be acquired in the capital first, and then buy a home through. He had to get permission from the rural old age. Only then could he choose, settle in an empty house or build a new on a free land. Piorito was extremely surprised and asked if everything was so easy. Andre explained that in the villages there were affairs. The process was not complicated at all, although the guy still doubted whether he would allow him to do so. He asked if he was afraid of the one that could be rejected because of a very unexpected appeal. The man sighed and answered, "They say his words speak for themselves." Andrew assured him he should not worry because he is his friend and he can always count on his support. He stressed that he was not a homeless man because he has repeatedly sent money transfers here that guaranteed his reliability. Andrew was convinced that the headman would not refuse him. Torito nodded. Smiling, she said she would also stand up for him. The guy thanked her sincerely, and Andrew added that he should first have breakfast. He already feels the unique aroma of delicious food. His daughter and Guy immediately supported his offer. After a hearty breakfast, they went to Hidman's house. Although his home was reminiscent of others, it was marked by its unique architecture. Hidman nodded gently, confirming that the situation was understood. The leader of the village was Leroy. Someone approached him and confessed that he had magical abilities. Kurito apologized for scaring him, because, as it seemed, he had previously shown the essence of his magic. Nina, with a serious facial expression, stated that she was seeking to move. Her father replied that it is too early to make. Leroy nodded and explained that, after a careful acquaintance and recommendations from Andre, there is no reason. The guy thanked the smile, but the story did not end, and here he decided to ask one question. He asked interested in why this village was chosen, because there are better places for peace, and his magic opened many opportunities. Sritho turned to Andre and Nina, trying to explain the problem as if a little upset. He said that before he arrived here, he had neither a family nor a place that could be called home. Living fully immersed in his work, he remembered the advice of his father, who always urged him to live as he wants. Others treated him with great kindness, despite the fact that he was a stranger for them. They expressed their readiness to always be glad to accept it in the middle of their circle. It is thanks to such a warm atmosphere that resembled family comfort that he decided to settle here, not to look for shelter somewhere. He explained that he seeks to settle down here because it is the life he chose for himself. The main leader nodded, agreeing with his intention. He noted that he was extremely satisfied with a positive attitude towards their village, and greeted him with joy, proclaiming a new resident of the village of Koran. Kirito sighed with relief, making sure that everything went well. Vin, smiling, expressed her joy from being accepted. Finally, the guy stressed that the main leader is actually a good person. He noticed and asked Nina why her father was slowly walking behind them. But she quietly explained that her father was uncomfortable because he confessed to Kurito that he was liked. Both exchanged the views, and the guy noted that his father turned out to be modest. To which he replied that there was nothing modest in it, just rarely speak such true words directly in the eye. Kurito realized that such confessions are extremely rare, and his father asked him to forget about it. Norman allowed the boy to stay in the village and entrust Andre's keys to empty homes. He suggested that these dwellings together and advised to think about further steps, whether a new home is worth building, or perhaps to restore the existing build. They went to the first house that did not impress with their scale. Andre noticed that although the house was ancient, he was still in excellent condition, which allowed to start the relocation immediately. Kurito nodded gently in agreement. He appreciated the house, noting that he was not bad, but would like him to be more spacious. They visited many different homes, from wooden houses to stone cottages, carefully evaluating each by a number of criteria: the cost of the area, the level of comfort, and the overall condition of the home. He decided to ask if he had liked at least one of the options, to which Kurito replied that they were all wonderful. Usually, the decisive argument was logistics, but this time the situation was completely different. They had more opportunities and far. Approaching, they noticed an attractive medium-sized house. Kurito, surprised to look at him, felt a warm admiration. It was noted that the house was visible from under the hill. Andrew noticed that the building was nearby and it was uncomfortable to talk about it immediately. Then Kurito decided to ask if there were residents. The man replied that the owners moved 3 months ago. Smiling, Kurito confessed that he was too shy to offer them to become neighbors, which Andrew ordered to keep silent. He laughed and stated that it was not a mistake to offer it, because being neighbors was a real pleasure. In addition, he emphasized that his appearance is far superior to the previous candidates. Andrew tilted his head and asked with passion, "What the hell is taken away do you say so incredibly beautiful?" To which he invited him to enter the house, and in response, Andrew said that now only the door would open. Inside the house, the sun poured every room with its light. From the outside, it looked flawless and cozy. A spacious living room, a light corridor leading to the kitchen, and the stairs that lifted to the second floor. He noted that the living room was extremely spacious, and Andrew mentioned that a big family once lived here. It made him think about whether the house would be too big for him. However, smiling, the guy said that everything would work, because a few more rooms, he realized that the house is too spacious for one, but already found the option. One of the rooms can be turned into a pantry, and the other, to place guests. Only he comprehended his further actions, as Nina called him again, this time from the first floor. He was unable to hurry after her. Nina led him to the back exit, from which a wonderful picture of nature was revealed, which immediately attracted her attention. Smiling, she explained, "A stream flows nearby, and if you listen, you can hear the murmur of water." Both stopped for a moment, listening to a little stream fun, running through forests and fields. Kurito noted that Nina was well known in this house, because she once played with his children. He suggested that in good weather you can put a chair here and enjoy nature. Andrew came out and confirmed that he liked it. He added that from time to time he goes into the yard, ignites a small heat, melts cheese, fries sausages, and drinks everything. He spoke with a gentle smile that would surely notify the head. Kurito was full of joy. He finally found the perfect house. On this day, the owner contacted the masters who came to complete the house. Andrew decided to ask him whether he was ready to make a cardinal repair, but received a clear refusal. Despite this, he liked everything in the home. He only noted that small changes in the kitchen and hallway will make them more like his own home. He only dreamed of how he would move here. Andre exhaled deeply and noted that when all the cases are in power, they would be able to go fishing together. The guy asked about fishing, enthusiastically emphasizing that it was wonderful. However, despite, he remembered that he was here for several days, and he thought if there would be no release. The guy noted that the work is quite flexible, so it is not necessary to worry. However, he felt that the village was too relaxed, and did not even assume that the work schedule could be tense. He decided that if he went there, he would be able to look for new furniture. Vidov said goodbye, and offered to go fishing after returning. Observing the guy rising into the air, he admired his incomparable magic again and again. Suddenly, the voice of Nina, who called Kurito, followed behind. Her father explained the girl who returned to the capital, which she sighed. Boredom reappeared on her. Appeared in the capital in a moment. Stretching, he remembered how he had not stirred the streets of the capital for a long time. He was pleasantly surprised that the city so cheerfully pulsated energy. Fredo decided to visit Emilio first, to make sure that everything is fine, because the furniture can wait. Moving along the streets, he mentioned the taste of a wonderful lunch in one of the local cafes. Suddenly, someone appeared in front of Kurito, who scared him with his greetings. He asked what was being done in this place and warned not to frighten so. Emilio explained that Kurito would soon return, and therefore suggested waiting here. The guy thanks to magic, it has penetrated Emilio's environment. Together with Rodney, he appeared in Emilio's office and greeted it. Rodney, with a serious species, asked who returned, to which Kurito answered that he had warned him about the absence, which he confirmed by Emilio himself. He explained that he had remained much longer than he had first planned. Kurito sincerely apologized to admit that he allowed himself a little extra admiration. According to him, there were no urgent cases, just anxiety because of its long absence. Emilio, in turn, asked if he had time to find a place where he could enjoy life, and asked to tell the details. Talking about his new home and plan to live in 2 different places, Emilio was a little surprised. and acknowledged that something interesting was unconditionally hidden. Kurito added that he always dreamed of a spacious house outside the city, because the village of Horn is a great place where many nice people live. He stated that he considers this decision correct. Emilio smiled and replied that he looked even better now, emphasizing that life between the two bases brings him real pleasure. If it is really his conscious will, he will honor it. Torito noted that although he is not going to sacrifice himself for the sake of the company, he also cannot afford to lose his job. Emilio confirmed that this is enough. He explained that the company is growing rapidly, so there will always be tasks that only he can accomplish. Credo, aware of this, nodded. He raised his gaze and added that he will have to live on two bases. He will need a home in the capital. To which the young man thoughtfully replied that the current living conditions for life were enough. Leo stated that he deserves his own home. He explained that when he lives in the hotel, he could never be sure when he returns, nor would you like to wait for him every time to wait for him on the street. Moreover, if he was waiting inside, the hotel executives would definitely be dissatisfied with such practice, and he would not have agreed to cause harm to a friendly relationship with them. However, if Kurito had his own house in the capital, he could wait for his boat as much as he pleased. The guy thought for a moment, and then, pointing to Kurito with his finger, agreed with such an idea. He claimed that if he plans to live on 2bi, Kurito waved, believing that hiring a servant is an extra pleasure. He understood that he had already earned enough. Instead, the Poltarians were not accustomed to such a luxury. In addition, he doubted whether he had to interfere with this case, because he did not belong to the bourgeoisie. However, Emilio decided to ask if he would be able to maintain a sufficient level of cleanliness in two homes. He noted that even one house is already a challenge for him, because his home was clearly large. If he did not use it regularly, it could accumulate dust and dirt within a week, especially taking into account other circumstances. It was extremely difficult to keep two houses at the same time, and it was not easy for it to agree. Emilio smiled and asked if he really agreed. He also noted that if he plans to have her own home here, then you should also have a servant. Emilio thought and agreed with this idea. I am convinced that it has nothing wrong with it. In addition, thanks to his connections, he will be able to buy property at a better price. He reassured him, assuring that he would take care of his servants. Kurito realized that this nuance did not even try to hide. Then his thoughts returned to the house in the royal capital, and he moved on, walking along the street. He believed that Emilio was probably too inflamed, and he was covered by a restless premonition. At the same time, the idea that the furniture for the house in Goran has not yet been bought. However, Emilio was right in one question. His connections were undoubtedly useful. Despite everything, he decided to continue the inspection of the home. Treating into his thoughts, he did not notice the girl and accidentally touch her shoulder. Quickly apologizing, he asked if everything was fine. The girl also answered a mutual apology. Viorito could not help but pay attention to her beauty and sophistication that would fit the aristocrat perfectly. The life of Kurito in his new residence on the royal metropolitan land promised to be completely ill that he imagined himself. He came to look at the new house of Cerrito, but when he saw him, he felt a crazy shock and could not believe his eyes. Before him, the view of a huge estate with spatial territory and impressive fountains, which skillfully reproduced fairy tale images, unfolded. He turned to Emilio to find out why he needed such a huge estate. Emilio explained that the more space, the better. That Kurito noted that the estate is not so great at all. He noted that the estate was too large, because its main home was in the village. Emilically, he said that the complaints should be stopped, because the servants will cope with such a house without problems. Moreover, he planned to use a discount Beck. He gathered everyone and stated, "Enough chat, time is money, and now let's go to watch the house." Purito asked, "Why are you so sublime as if you were buying a home for yourself?" He replied with surprise, "Isn't it nice to look for a house for your friends?" It seemed to me that everything sounds a little strange. The man explained that there is an incredible landscape from here, and a large company is nearby. He asked why this house was not elected, which the interlocutor, as if found a fool, answered W. Inspect the estate that impressed with its luxury. Walking through the narrow streets, Kurito noted the unusual silence of this area, which had little in the royal capital. The woman explained that the aristocrat once lived in this house, but the dwelling remains empty for 3 years. Although the place is located remotely from the center, its peace fascinated. Finally, they got the designated place, and the woman invited them to get acquainted with the house. The house was no less grand than the previous estate. She was surprised that the house was extremely cozy, but Emilio noted that he did not look like an estate of a wealthy man because of his classic simplicity. She explained that the aristocrat who once lived here favored a modest lifestyle without unnecessary splendor. The guy noticed that his tastes resemble the tastes of that aristocrat, and life in such silence is much calmer. Subsequently, she suggested entering the house, and everyone agreed unanimously. He stood, unable to believe his eyes. He noted that the house corresponded to the estate in size, but the atmosphere was incredibly calm. The woman confirmed his impression, emphasizing that the difference in size and number of rooms was barely noticeable. She also noted that all their homes are equipped with magical artifacts of fire and water, to which the new moon expressed his satisfaction with the convenience of such a decision. However, this house had another unique feature. She assured that the room had her own bath, but the guy was skeptical of her words. After passing, he found himself in a spacious bathroom that struck him. Emilio explained that he cares about cleanliness and takes a shower daily, after which he sharply stated that he finally decided and took the house, while asking his cost. It had a great impact on Emilio, because he was surprised that the house fell to his liking. The woman explained that usually sets a price of 500 gold coins, but because he was a friend of Emilio, she suggested a discount, to sell for 400 gold. Realized that this amount is too low for the local real estate market. Then Emilio joined the conversation and asked to make an additional discount. Emilio was extremely surprised when she set a price 380, but this amount did not suit him. He stated that he was ready to give a discount only on the goods she would choose. He was convinced that it would be liked by her management. It gradually reduced the price to a minimum, although Emilio insisted that it would be more profitable for him to sell without discounts. Finally, it set the final cost of 150 gold, which forced to feel anxiety during the conversation. Emilio smiled immediately and stated that they were completely satisfied and ready to buy a house. With a certain nervousness of voice, she thanked them. Began to feel uncomfortable. Although he achieved a significant discount, he turned to Emilio and noted that he deliberately reduced the cost to stimulate it more hard. The man additionally explained that he did this. He could significantly reduce the amount to make him make more effort. He confirmed his correctness because the goods were extremely valuable, and he would have to personally deliver them. He did not consider the discount obtained in vain, but immediately added that he only joked because the goods were already in stock. He was pleased that was able to buy a house at a favorable price. Emilio continued to intimidate him, but thus won the second house in the prestigious area of the royal capital. 3 days later, returned to the house and was surprised to find that everything was ready. He asked Emilio if he was in no hurry. However, Emilio replied that the house is already in good condition, so fast cleaning has become a logical step. He mentioned he took care of the servants. Also remembered how he heard the mention of it. Going to the house, they were met by the guy asking if everyone was in place. And so, the voice of warmth said, "Welcome." Do saw an attractive girl with long golden hair. She turned to him and gently reported that everyone was looking forward to their arrival. She was behind her 3 more girls who smiled kindly, watching them. She felt astonishment and a little embarrassment when Emilio explained that these girls were his servants. They did not meet her expectations at all. The Fuda received a spatial magic from a mysterious essence, which allows you to move anywhere, and decided to settle at 2 bases at once, one in the capital and the other in the countryside. He finally fulfilled his dream and purchased a new home in the capital. But the servant organized by Emilio did not meet his expectations at all. These girls were found to be a servant. The main one said that she was in a difficult position because of the inefficient control of Mr. Carito's estate. She leaned easily in a polite gesture, introducing herself as Elsa Volker, the chief maid. She said with a smile that meeting with her became a true pleasure. He understood this, and at the same time surprised Emilio by the fact that he did not mention that she was planning to hire young girls. Emilio just smiled and asked where something bad was here. For men it was a real holiday for the eyes. However, when he heard her name, he was unexpectedly surprised, again turned to her, calling her an aristocrat. She categorically stated that it belongs to the so-called walks. But given that she was the 4th daughter of a modest parish family, he could feel calm. However, the guy decided to clarify whether it concerns other servants. To which the girl, something surprised, replied, "No, they come from a baron family. They introduced themselves during dating. A girl with red braids was called Larash Elfur. The second, with blonde hair gathered in two tails, bore the names of Lulu and the city, and the third, brunette, introduced herself as Arsland. All together expressed their pleasure from getting acquainted with him. Everyone explained that they applied for internships at Emilio to gain the necessary experience. Emilio himself added that the daughters of noble families sometimes work as assistants, receiving a certain grant. Kuruto's shock immediately asked him, "Why, the hell, did you assign the girls in your estate to the position of servants?" He stopped for a moment, after which he stated that he did not understand what to talk about. What Kurito sharply noticed that he did not try to play a fool with him. In this world, with the exception of individual races, anyone who bears a family name is considered an aristocrat. However, not all nobles belong to the highest public class, and quite often younger children decide to make a career in the service. Although this was not a major problem, her name seemed familiar, because all the families of these girls were interconnected in business. However, in good words, an unexpected reality was hidden. All of them were only 12 to 15 years old, and even the older maid, in appearance, did not exceed 20. All of these details caused serious suspicion of the presence of a criminal scheme. He became embarrassed and hid his face with his hands. How could one relax in the environment where even servants occupy the highest status? In addition, how can we use these girls? Emilio, with a slight smile, noted that Kurito had the happiness to be among the real beauties. Kurito noted that there was no good in this, and asked why only girls were chosen. Emilio replied in surprise if he would like the boys. He explained that when he returns home exhausted, he is more pleasant to see wonderful girls, not harsh men, because it reassures him. Fueguitito asked if he checked the opportunity, and Emilio replied that he already had a cozy hut in the countryside to relieve stress, because he found nothing like this in the royal capital. These words made him think. He looked at him with a distrustful look, after which the guy smiled and asked if he could guess. Emilio explained that at the first meeting he clearly stated his unwantedness to the male sex, but could not understand why the interlocutor did not like his company. Tureto said that he understood his words wrong. A little Nina with a radiant smile appeared before his eyes, but suddenly he realized that only the thought of her could lead to his death. Purito explained that he seeks a peaceful life and did not plan to be intrigued, and Emilio sighed, noting that his reasoning reminds the thinking of an elderly man. Kurito settled in the living room when Elsa asked if they wanted tea. Everyone agreed with joy. One of them even chose tea without sugar. Kurito followed Elsa, carefully looking at her. He noted that he seems inconvenient, to which the young man answered that he could not relax when a maid fuss. Emilio added that he did not like to give orders at work, to which the young man noted that he had never resorted to such actions, realizing that the habits of a simple employee were significantly rooted. Soon the girl brought tea and put it on the table, for which Kurito heartily thanked her. She explained to him that, despite all the manifestations of respect, they are now his servants, so they occupy a lower status, and excessive politeness in communication has become unnecessary. Emilio confirmed this, noting that this is the case. Otherwise it would not be clear who is the owner and who is the servant. Fredo acknowledged that it would be difficult to get used to the new order, but promised that he would adapt over time. The guy agreed, and thanked again for his advice. She cast a harsh look at him as if she had reproached something inappropriate. Kurito stated that he understood her well, although in the middle of his thoughts he acknowledged, she is incredibly beautiful, but at the same time caused some concern. As soon as Emilio left Neo, he soon felt in the house and decided to leave. Their contract was too fast, and he thought where they were in a hurry, because it was his day off. However, Elsa surprised him. Having learned about his magic, she did. She did not worry about the little things, because her manners testified to aristocratic origin. However, it was at that moment that someone called Kurito, and when he turned, he could not believe his own eyes from the one he saw. Genus, one of the adventurers of the group Grimesword, visited the cafe near. Kurito, with a smile on his face, noted how long they did not see, and asked how things were, to which the family confidently replied that everything was fine. Then, seriously lifting his eyebrows, the Genus added that by giving up regular visits, he had to get rid of some lazy habits. Kurito, laughing, noted that he recognized his old friend, and also asked about the affairs of other team members. He noted that they have a day off today. Arna and Alina went to public baths, and Rox chose to spend the evening behind a glass with several old friends from Guild. Harad recalled that he could always use his own bathroom, and realized that her purchase was justified. The genius asked how he had, because he heard about his work on the company. It made Harad think about the answer, after which he told everything in detail. The genius was amazed, hearing that Kirito bought the estate with a servant. He was interested in the work of Kirito and his earnings, so he asked to tell more. However, Kirito refused to share the details, citing the confidentiality of information. He explained that they were quite young and inexperienced. Apparently, it was their first experience, and they felt ineptly. He added that everyone once had to start. Talking about himself as a young adventure seeker, he confessed that he was accompanied by a number of failures, and often happiness was not on his side. However, when the guild management was reliable, every adventurer could always find comfort in support. He was aware that to accept the subordinates so suddenly, the task is not from the easy, but their good needs to be determined. Kirito completely shared his thought. Although they looked calm, it was their first job. Kirito, like no other, knew what to work under the guidance of a lazy, and for a moment he thought about it. Realizing that it is necessary to act now, he made a solid decision. Meanwhile, Elsa, performing her usual evening bypasses, intended to knock on the door of her master. Suddenly, when she stood, Kirito appeared behind her, stating she was home. Hearing his voice, the girl was scared and jumped in horror, looking closely at him. Immediately, Kirito apologized for the fear caused. She bowed her head timidly, apologizing for her fracture and acknowledging that the fear was caused by her. Fiorito understood that although her cold and restrained appearance may seem unattainable, she was still a young and inexperienced girl. Returning to her, he stated that he would want to take a bath, although time was still early, and asked her to prepare her for him. She smiled gently and said that she would prepare everything immediately. Shirito replied with a warm smile. I was convinced that there was nothing wrong with that, and decided to make an effort to be a truly hospitable master. He soon turned to her again. She frankly expressed her thoughts that he went for dinner. Cirist explained that everything happened because of unnecessary drinking. Elsa noted that their company has no chefs, to which Cirito confessed that he did not take into account this nuance. Soon, Elsa covered it on the table, and Kirito, enthusiastically looking at the dishes, noted that unexpectedly we exhibited a real folk cuisine, to which Elsa confirmed his observation. He explained that although they belonged to the aristocracy, their origin was from small border towns, where family life was almost indistinguishable from common people. It was quite clear, Kirito. Indeed, the girls who joined the service lost their way. They may have been sent here to marry Emilio, as its rapid disappearance only strengthened this assumption. However, Kirito decided not to delve into thinking about this topic. To his surprise, dinner was delicious, and that night, the new moon fell asleep with a strong, motionless sleep. Waking up in magnificent circumstances and enjoying life in the majestic capital, he realized that everything was not so bad. A hot bath brought him true joy. Now it was available every day, and he could enjoy relaxation as much as he wanted. It was a great way to overcome fatigue. He remembered Elsa kindly offered to help him in washing and back massages. However, when he dressed, he realized that it was time to take things up. He met him on the ground floor and told about today's plans. Kirito noted that he should check the state of repair of the house and the village. The work had to be completed, because in 3 days he will return to the capital. He added that he wished her a wonderful day, thanking her, and then dissolved in the air, leaving a light breeze behind. He suddenly appeared in the village of Goran. After examining the outer part of the house, he realized that everything was ready. Despite the fact that the design of the facade was not included in the order, the building impressed with its beauty, and a cozy small garden appeared in the backyard. The changes were insignificant but noticeable enough to update the appearance of the house. Fiorito decided to enter inside, but the doors were closed, and he realized that he would not get inside without a key. It did not surprise him, because the door was new, and the castle was just installed. Without knowing where the carpenter lives, Fiorito had no other choice than to turn to the head of the village. But suddenly, someone called him. Nina nodded to him, notifying his return. She loudly announced that she had the key to his home, which he was glad to say that it was a wonderful news. She then stated that she would bring it immediately, but Fiotito noted that she was in no hurry. Despite this, Nina ran up and handed the key, for which he sincerely thanked her. He possessed a satisfied expression of the face. Kirito, intrigued by her eyes, asked why she was looking so closely at him. She replied that she did not deny the opportunity to look at him as well. The man gladly agreed and announced that she would become his first guest. Nina, sincerely rejoicing, smiled gently in response. Frito remembered what he was energetic, however. Despite this, children always remained sweet creatures. He did not seek a romantic relationship at the moment, although he may have ever wanted to create a family. However, he did not have a specific candidate in his thoughts, and Nina had already insisted that he open the door. He asked her to wait a little, and here they opened the door together, looking carefully that they were hiding behind them. Inside the house, bright light poured the corridor, penetrating each corner and filling the room with a gentle glow. Nina immediately noticed how everything changed, and additional space appeared. She barely stepped on the floor as she stopped Kirito instantly. He looked at her and asked what happened. He soon asked that at the entrance to his home, she should wear slippers. She was interested. She asked why he was, to which he answered that the shoes in the house were strictly forbidden. Considering the SL, however, he firmly adhered to his principles. In the capital, everything was exclusively organized. They were cleaned at every step, and the streets were paved with a stone so that his shoes always remained clean. Instead, another atmosphere prevailed in the village of Koran. Wild paths, where dirt and grass changed each other, created their rhythm of life. That is why he left a special place to shoot shoes, though it seemed strange local. But the girl immediately said it was wonderful. She noted how easy these shoes are, which Curly confirmed her words. He also explained that they were extremely comfortable and have no contact with the floor, which caused her to admire his reasonableness. Lena added that the shoes were very pleased and that she would definitely wear them at home. Smiling, Kirito suggested making a new rural fashion from this, after which both laughed together. Continuing the movement of the living room, they installed panoramic windows through which the fascinating view of the mountains opened. Nina noted that the living room space seems increased, to which Kirito replied that everything remains as it was. He just removed the wall that once framed the fireplace and combined the space with the kitchen. Nina noted that this was the idea, but in her opinion the room still seemed more. The man explained that he could not withstand the tightness of the kitchen. She explained what was happening, because she never saw her dad prepared. He always only smoked a mug. Reading it, he laughed, and added that he could not imagine how Andre could cook. Meanwhile, Andre, busy with his duties, suddenly began to sneeze, which made her guess about the possible cold. She noted that not only the father but other men of the village participated in the preparation of food. Teorito was convinced that in this world men were almost never prepared, doing only work or homework, although the chefs should of course be. He explained that they would cook together and then arrange a shared food, because the places were always enough for everyone. Even when he was not in the village, he and his mother were able to use the kitchen. The guy believed that for the sake of the perfect family atmosphere, everything should be done to bring people closer. In such a wonderful home, there is no place of void. His reflection was unexpectedly interrupted by Nina. She felt that their lives would become even more joy. I was eagerly waiting for the moment when they were able to cook delicious dishes together, go to the woods where you can catch insects, enjoy the game by the river, and admire the flowers. From Kirito, she had many common plans and exciting ideas. Smiling, she expressed his joy that he settled here, and emphasized that she promised to be full of fun every day. Having reached out, she said that I was glad to meet her new neighbor. He reached out to her, smiling sincerely, and noted that she was happy to meet. The calling moon suddenly reminded Nina that she urgently needed to hurry home. Fiorito, in surprise lifting his eyebrows, asked impatiently about household chores. She confirmed that she helps on the farm by caring for priests and other plants. Kirito noted that it was really cool. She expressed a desire to look at his home in more detail, but he stressed that they are now neighbors, and she could always visit. This was very pleased. Lena promised to give him an onion when she matured, said goodbye, and disappeared behind the door. The guy broke out about how fleetingly the childhood years pass, like a light wind. Remembering her words about the farm, the guy noticed that, while living here, he could do the growing vegetables, which, in his opinion, would benefit him. He decided to discuss his idea with Stella. Going into the room, he surprised the space that came to life before his eyes. A spacious but at the same time an empty room. Since there were many things in front of him, he decided to start with filling the free space and ventilating the room. Opening the window, a refreshing cool breeze has entered the house. He admired the space that stretched in front of his house through the open window, and explained that it was such a life built on two bases. Gathering all power, he realized that it was time to start the arrangement. He came to him, telling him that he had just finished working and decided to help with his move. Of course, Kirito sincerely thanked him for his help. He explained that he had finished working for almost a few minutes ago that Andre made such promptness. He explained that his magic makes it easy to carry luggage and instantly put things on, which Andrew nodded clearly. However, upset by asking for help, he apologized to a guy who, surprised, suggested that he visit tea. Immediately in the head of Andrew there was an idea about the celebration of a housewarming, but he was stopped by Stella, emphasizing that there are many more cases in Kirito. If he finished, why not? Kirito smiled. Thinking, he decided to ask Stella to cook something delicious. Kirito suggested that if they were a little trouble, they could use his kitchen, because he was too exhausted to cook. A friend agreed, but on the terms that they will only briefly inspect his house. Kirito went with Stella and Nina to the house. He noted the power of Andre acts with, and envied such energy, realizing that he would not be able to prepare anything. Then he decided to try himself in creating a variety of drinks. He went ahead and shouted happily that his visitors were already nearby. Stella smiled and gave him, because she wanted to assure that it was not a problem on the first day of moving. The guy waved, saying that everything is fine, and the house was Entering the living room, they were immediately amazed at how skillfully the room was equipped. He was pleasantly surprised to learn that the house was really impressive, but Kirito immediately noted that she had previously been here. Henry noted that the boy had a wonderful sense of style, which was even more surprised by Kirito. He remembered that in his past life he never decorated the house with plants. Looking at her wife, Kirito thought if she was fine with her, or maybe she got sick. Paying attention to Sean brightly, she carefully examined a new kitchen. It was struck by a modern space equipped with magical devices that gained popularity in the capital. She confessed that she saw such perfect equipment for the first time, and could not believe that even water could flow with magical power. Kirito watched her feelings, fully sinking into wonder. Stella never looked so passionate. Nina suggested that the mother buy the same kitchen, after which Andre noted that she probably was extremely expensive. Stella apologized with a gentle smile, to which Kirito replied that everything was fine, and she apologized to the guy for the noise. Cirist, smiling, noted that they managed to have fun, and still invited her to his home, but suggested that it was the preparation of food. After answering, she reported that she had already prepared some dishes at home and opened a basket with flavors. Kirito noted that everything seemed extremely appetizing, and she explained that there was a potato pot with potatoes among the dishes. The table was served on the table, and she hoped that this delicacy would appeal to his taste. Kirito, stunned by a variety of dishes, stated that they tasted extremely, although he remained indifferent inside. In this world, there were also its seasons, and here came the beginning of summer. Kirito tasted a seasonal dish with pleasure. The guy asked what she plans to do with food remains. She explained that she intends to prepare a carcass with agigsib sauce and fresh salad. Hearing this, he gladly suggested help, if only it is expected. Stella suggested to start cooking until the famine took its own, and Kirito agreed. He quickly took off his clothes and went to cook dinner. Stella said Nina told her, he is really able to cook. Smiling, Kirito praisefully added that thanks to his independent life, he had a little bit of his culinary skills. He noted that it is great that he can cook on his own. Fuerito felt mild discomfort from his insecurity. Nina's mother continued, saying that her husband was able to assist only in extreme cases. Smiling, he replied that if she turned to him, he would probably not refuse to support. She decided to clarify whether he really thought, and Fuerito confirmed his words. Convinced that his love for the family was equivalent to her feelings, he opened a strict look behind himself and rotating saw that Andre was watching them closely. Fuerito asked him not to scare him in this way that Andre answered that he would replace him in the kitchen. Without being surprised, Fuerito immediately rushed to the door. Someone asked what was wrong with him, to which Nina replied that she did not understand such a reaction. However, after a moment, she added that she was probably upset by what she confessed. Kurito gets along well with her mother. Realizing that he was jealous, the guy immediately confessed that he was feeling unnatural. At the same time, shouts from the kitchen came from the kitchen that someone was overheating. And her mother's voice asked loudly if everything was fine. Andrew stood near the stove, discussing something when she carefully rubbed his sealed hand with a damp towel. His injury was obvious. Along with Ferrate and Nino, they were interested in this scene. One of the boys noted what beauty radiates this situation, to which Nino responded to. She explained with a smile that when she marries, she would seek to have the same harmonious happiness as her parents. Kurito was surprised that children of her age were already thinking about such things, but their conversation was buried by their parents, calling Nina to help cover the table. Nina hurried to the table and asked if the guy would help her. What he nodded and took a place at the table. Then his father, with a smile, announced that it was time to celebrate Kurito's housewarming. They lifted glasses and exclaimed together, "Let's be!" She stated with a smile that she would like to taste her first dish prepared by her father. Kurito immediately supported her and added that he was also interested in trying this culinary experiment. Andrew greeted everyone with wishes delicious. Howie, for the sake of the well-being of his family, Andrew was ready for any steps. Kurito offered him a joint training to succeed next time. He woke up at dawn because of a ringing sound that suddenly broke his peace. At first, he could not understand where he came from. The morning call announced the beginning of a new day. Now, living in the village, Kurito put the kettle on fire to boil water for tea. He opened the veranda window, stepped on her, and leaning quietly on the railing, enjoying a wonderful landscape. I thought about how hard it can be life, wrapped in excessive luxury, and glad, because he was now surrounded by peace, because no one paid attention to how he drinks tea. There he lived in full freedom, a kind of bastion that belonged only to him. He could enjoy breakfast anywhere, taste tea in different corners, and afford to be lazy. This was the charm of double life. Here he could finally relax. Going into the yard, he immediately began to exercise. Suddenly, Nina ran to him, happily greeting a good morning. Kurito answered reciprocity, further emphasizing that she rose very early today. Then he asked, "What do you do?" He explained to this that he was doing the exercises to make it easier to relax. Nina looked at him in surprise. She did not know why it needed, but decided to try with him. The Kurito agreed and suggested that she repeat for him, to which she responded to. Together, they began to perform various warm-up exercises. Smiling, he noted that the movements looked quite strange. Viorito suggested that they would probably be perceived for a person from another world. The guy explained that the importance of such exercises should not be diminished. They really helped to... He approached them and greeted them too, wished her a good morning. She apologized for the fact that Nina interferes with him in the morning, and he calmly replied that everything was fine, and the company was getting much more fun with her. Fiorito noted that after moving here, Nina became much happier, and her daughter smiled, confirming it. He mentally noted what a pleasant phenomenon. After that, she asked not to detain her for a long time, because she was still waiting for work in the fields. Nina also replied that she would definitely remember this request. She remained with her mother after saying goodbye to Kurito. Only then did he realize that he was lonely, and wondered who really entertained anyone in this situation. Recalling that he should enjoy free time, he realized that he was definitely not alone. Finding a stool, he put it next to the tree and was comfortable. Just think about how wonderful it would be to freshen up in 10. For a moment, he thought about frying sausages on fire, as Andre advised, but after breakfast, alcohol was definitely not for him. Lifting his gaze to heaven, he immediately came up with a brilliant idea. He headed for a small forest, where he gently hung a hammock between two majestic trees, and immediately realized that it was exactly what he needed. He remembered that once in his spare time, he borrowed some fabric and rope in Emilio, of which he skillfully made his own hammock. Although Emilio doubted this design, Toretto felt a slight anxiety through manual work. But having felt a pleasant softness of the structure, he decided to try to relax in it. Landing into a hammock, he suddenly felt a light shock. He was a real genius. Kurito mentioned that he never dreamed of such a gorgeous, calm existence in his past life. Through the trees, gentle sunlight broke through, and the light, cool breath of the wind gently wrapped the boy's face. He lifted his eyes to the sky and watched the birds circling in the air. He liked the quiet rustle of trees that created the perfect monastery he dreamed of. Gradually, he began to close his eyes. He tapped in the hammock, enjoying every sound and a moment that unfolded around. Kirito was unexpectedly interrupted by Nina, who flew to him and asked what was talking about. Suddenly he jumped and asked in surprise why she was here because she had to work in the field. Nina explained that although she was doing work, she was very interested in what Mr. Kirito was busy. He apologized for being distracted by her. Stella approached them and apologized for failing to keep her from intervention. Kirito only smiled gently in response, remembering how children are being affected. He realized how inquisitive she was and seeking to feel something new, which she could. She was passionate and rejoiced in telling how fun she was, which Kirito promised to rock her and immediately began to do it, forcing her laughter to become more louder. Stella asked if she was feeling true happiness, explaining that it was time to get back to work. But her daughter insisted that she should try to feel it. Nino insisted that Stella would try to lie down in the swing. Stella agreed, stating that if so persistently convinced it is worth trying. Be careful in the swing. She obediently closed her eyes as it was ordered. Nina was standing next to a few minutes, realizing that she had fallen asleep. Suddenly, the guy was surprised and loudly asked if she actually shook, which immediately made her open her eyes sharply. Leaving the hammock, she stated that she had no time to rest because she urgently needs to go to work. Fiorito thought she really looks tired. Nina suggested dedicating this day to the game, which the guy was separating, noting that the hammock is J. Saying goodbye and thanks to Kirito, Nina asked permission to stay on a swing. He agreed with a smile, waving her in agreement, and repeated Stella's words that the plants also had a soul. In the last world, he rarely has been engaged in such affairs, because everything was much more difficult. Self-sufficient rural life. They chose the space of rural areas where lush greenery prevailed. He is convinced that it was the optimal choice. But the disadvantage was his absence of the necessary knowledge. Resting in the hammock, Kirito thought about his own farm. He imagined how a variety of cultures would come to life in his yard. Understanding all the attractiveness of this idea, he decided to try his hand in gardening. Having realized that every case should be done with full return, he came to the conclusion that today it is possible to postpone all efforts. Continuing to enjoy relaxation, he made sure that this day should be devoted to rest. Closing his eyes, he plunged into a sweet sleep with a warm smile on his face. He was engaged in household chores when they knocked on the door. Andre and Nina appeared on the threshold. Nina's father asked the hammock with interest. Kirito, a little nervous, smiled and led him to the place where he was. Realizing the growing popularity of the hammock, he decided to tell how it could be done. Thanks to the power of cosmic magic, Kirito moves between the capital and the village. Listening to Nina, he came to the conclusion that he wanted to have his own farm and grow crops in the village of Koran. After that, he addressed the advice to Andre. When he visited the family garden, Kirito looked at him carefully, and Andre did not resist that he made such a step. He replied that he wanted to plant something. Andre, with a smile supporting his idea, said that it was a great idea. Andrew smiled and suggested that he unexpectedly surprised the interlocutor, who, having asked if confident, received the affirmative. He noted that it is wonderful that he was interested in agriculture. Then Andrew interestedly learned he was looking for a product that he would not have to take care of. Kirito immediately confirmed. That's how. It would be perfect if the case had grown in itself under proper care. Andrew thought and offered to grow either green onions or potatoes, to a small, well-groomed area of land, which caused a great surprise and a shock in Kirito. She noted her incredible beauty, which Andre unambiguously agreed. She asked him, sure whether she could handle, and received an affirmative answer. Stella explained that even in the flower pot in the house, it is possible to grow green onions, and the potatoes, by its nature, will grow itself, and added that even the busy Kirito will overcome this task. The guy was happy and stated that he was ready to call. Andre appealed to him and suggested to taste the newly collected onion, to which Kirito smiled. Seeing Andre's hand next to his hand, he was impressed with its size. Stella explained that this is the value for this onion is the norm. Kirito thought that the bulb was truly enormous, not at all as he imagined it. It was compared to the size of a special type of onion grown in his homeland, and he realized that he would never grow that value. He turned to Stella, showing her that the size may be smaller in other places. But she stated that it was too little, and explained that he probably just imagined this size, because in fact it is only weed. He felt as if he had lost his common sense. For a moment, Andre broke him, carefully cleaned and suggested that Kirito to taste. Stella wished him a pleasant appetite, and he gladly made the first bite. He glowed with happiness, declaring how sweet it was. Despite its giant sizes, the taste resembled a ripe fruit. Andrew noted that it can be consumed in any form, baked, boiled, although he preferred raw. Stella explained that this ingredient is indispensable for cooking. It is extremely easy to grow, and cooking does not require effort. That was directed as a comment to the mentor more pretty. Kirito thought that he was impressed as Cole. He stated that he was planning to grow green onions, to which Andre was surprised to respond to his quick consent. Stella, in turn, suggested paying attention to garlic because he was already in place. Surprised, he noted that it was something like going to another small field where small green shrubs grew. Kirito was delighted with the thought of seeing the heart of the fields. Stella announced that she would now bring a few to try. They explained that these vegetables differ in their simplicity. Even with minimal care, they grow confidently and do not need much effort. Tsurito responded interested, considering it quite attractive. Henry added that it was even easier to grow them than an onion, which he nodded clearly. However, Stella joined the conversation soon and showed a couple of varieties of potatoes. He noted that these potatoes look longer and thinner than usual. Furito was surprised, but explained that they had to be cooked and suggested taking home for cooking. Smiling, Ferrier thanked Furito. She also noted that the cultivation of other crops was somewhat more complicated and became interested in his opinion. He replied that he was going to try to grow green onions and potatoes, which Andre agreed and assured that he would. Smiling, she assured that she would share seeds and sprouts without problems. The guy asked if she was sure of it. Andrew replied that he had enough of them, so he should not worry about anything, and added that you can always turn to it for help in case of difficulty, for which he received gratitude. They came to his rescue again. On the same day, Kirito immediately took the case, already arranging a 3-meter planting area in the backyard, marking the boundaries of the site. He was carefully convinced that the sizes were in accordance with Andre's recommendations and was ready for work. Recognizing that it would be difficult to cope with a large area immediately, he decided to gradually expand the field as it was used. But first it was necessary to get rid of weeds. Looking at their numbers, he thought about the next steps. The flow of contraction has left the herbal coating almost invisible, cutting it to a minimum. It was a simple step, but the essence that gave him these abilities did not assume that he would use magic to cut herbs. However, this came to save time. The roots remained in the soil and will be able to be removed during digging, which it started immediately after the haircut was completed. On the use of distortions for soil digging. He was just about to use magic, as he stopped immediately, deciding to put an end to the kinging, and immediately took up the case. Andre, nodding in his direction, reported that he had brought the fertilizer and advised to add it together with the start of digging. It was unexpected to see that he had already started digging and asked him if he was mowing too quickly. He explained that he felt lazy to clean everything manually, so he decided to use his magic. Andrew noted that this decision was extremely convenient and asked him to demonstrate how he did, which Kirito immediately agreed. Having made a sharp movement of the hands and saying the spell, he again cut a small area of grass. Andrew's face seemed to be surprised. He asked what it was and, enthusiastically marking the effect of the trick, asked to repeat him again. He could not hold back his admiration, watching how skillfully Curly mowing the grass. He explained enthusiastically that his magic is so interesting that you can watch it forever. Kirito was glad that he liked this sight. Remembering the fertilizer, he asked if he brought him with him, which Andrew showed him a bag, and the guy thanked it sincerely for it. Going to him, he asked to help with the weeding, because he brought the necessary fertilizer. Fredo, in surprise, asked where such circumstances came from. He stated that he would transfer the fertilizer for free, noting the ability of the interlocutor to quickly change his shoes. His friend replied that it was a fair agreement. Kirito understood the meaning of his words, and added that for a bag of fertilizers for an area of 3x4, he would arrange to work in such a plot. Andre, however, stated that it was too little. But the interlocutor, at the same time showing a light sarcastic smile and tranquility, insisted that it was an equivalent exchange. Kirito laughed and explained that everything was a joke. He assured that he would deal with the situation, but warned that they would have to push their fields, which was clearly surprised by Andre. He thanked for the help, acknowledging that this was a difficult thing. To which Kirito remarked, "A bunch of work awaits," and Andre replied that only Stella works, jokingly hinted that love is evil. It is worth noting that, no matter what it may seem like a joke, negotiations with merchants always require great effort. Kirito calmly assured that everything is under control. Remembering Emilio, he realized that he had not yet encountered real merchants. With such people, peace of rest would be inaccessible, but he just couldn't change the situation. Once in another world, he got to this village and met a family that was always ready to help. Having realized how valuable their kindness was, he decided to find a way to thank for that selfless support. He promised that he would deal with his hands, because they accepted him and immediately met him as one of his own. The Onrei's family taught Kirito to care for the field, and he, in response, applied his spatial magic to help them with grass mowing. However, the guy feels that the exchange of services is not enough and wants to make another gesture. After performing excellent skills in his small field, he decides to take a short break. He was tired of the endless mowing of the grass from the owner Andre, despite his efforts, pleased with dinner. Kirito examined his work and smiled satisfied, convinced that at this point the work was finally completed. It was like a real vegetable garden. He was pleased to realize how pleased to do something non-standard, except for his main work. However, the lack of physical activity was already affected, so he decided to call it his hobby. Behind his back, someone noted that he was engaged in gardening, and did it with a pleasant compliment. The old people to whom he handed over a letter with money. Taylor's mother explained that they did not even get acquainted during the first meeting. Greg's father was convinced that the traveler would never ask the names of ordinary peasants, but Kirito apologized for such behavior. They introduced themselves to Angelica and Stamp. Kirito bowed his head and said that they had not seen themselves for a long time, apologizing for the delayed greetings of neighbors. Angelica reassured him, saying that in such a difficult situation with moving, it was not necessary to have additional worries, and Kirito, in response, assured that this was not a problem. He was already settling, so it did not create any problems for him. The old man immediately noticed that he noticed how he had engaged in horticulture. Griff became interested in what he was growing, to which Kirito replied, he planned to start with potatoes and onions. Sitting next to his small garden, he explained that in order to properly develop the roots of potatoes, it is necessary to lift the bed. The guy, smiling with surprise and gratitude, promised to follow this advice. However, Griff did not stop there. He gave him a bag, declaring that another pleasant surprise was waiting for. Kirito asked what it was, and learned that it was a thank you for the task, and a house that he could use as much as you like. Angelica stretched another small bag and explained that it had cheese oil. Immediately hearing the charming aroma, Kirito wondered if he was exaggerated here, and whether the utensils were in order. He asked if Mr. Griff had made them personally, because his family is known to produce high-quality kitchenware. After reading a note where it was noted that only a real master could create such wonderful plates, he sincerely thanked Mr. Griffu and promised to keep this invaluable gift. The old man smiled warmly in response. Mr. Griff immediately became serious, assuring that it was nothing special. But Angelic noticed that he felt a slight inconvenience, which he immediately denied. It was not true. Kirito, watching his ability to look sad, suggested that he may not know how to show his kindness. He soon decided to ask an old woman if she had cows or sheep, and she smiled, confirmed that so. She explained that they had a lot of sheep at home, and the food she cooked for him was made of sheep milk. He imagined her as a real shepherd. Smiling, he noted that he was looking at the possibility of animal husbandry, for which she advised to choose a sheep, because they reliably supplied milk and wool. She noted that they could be used as a source of meat, which the guy, slightly surprised, replied, "Yes, you can probably." She suggested to consider this idea, and he noted that he could think about it, although he did not plan to breed them exclusively for meat. Angelica returned home and said goodbye to Kirito. The guy, glowing with a smile, once again thanked and answered a welcoming woman. Kirito prepared a small dinner and paid attention to the incredibly delicious butter and cheese that Angelica gave him, as well as praised the dishes that Griff brought. In this world, everyone had a role. Not only Griff and Angelica, but also Andre, who, fishing in the forest thicket, was watching the safety of his village. Meanwhile, Stella and Nina worked tirelessly in the fields, growing a wide range of crops. Each of those present owned the unique abilities through which they worked harmoniously, like parts of one mechanism, not in need of any supernatural power. This prompted him to think, if they can, why I will not try to acquire such skills. If you could do something else to help this world. Last morning, Fredo suddenly received a visit to the guests. Still yawning after sleep, he left the house when the village's elder appeared on the doorstep and greeted him warmly with a good morning. Surprised by the meeting, Fredo turned to her using his full name, but the elder was gently asked not to be so official. Having apologized for what he visited so early, he noted that he had already settled and wondered if there were any remarks. Viorito immediately replied that he was pleased. The air is clean, the food is delicious, and people are extremely friendly. However, the elder noted that it was difficult to see pleasure from his face and asked what was wrong. Then he replied, "Why do you think so? Please say honestly." Yesterday, he was visited by Angelica and Griff, after which the head of the settlement reported that they were engaged in their business. He said that the gifts received were extremely useful for him in these parts. Despite the joy he felt some confusion inside. He wondered if he could somehow help the village to return the doll, because he understood that his life was divided between the two worlds. He understood that he was not able to stay here forever, and that his place among the villagers seems less significant. Despite the fact that he found his place, he was tormented by the thought that he was gaining support, but was not giving in response. The elder, hearing his words, acknowledged that he likes that Kurito seeks to help their village. However, Leroy warned him for a hurry, which caused a surprised look in Kurito. The headman explained that they live in a rural def, where few people, there is nothing like shops, and there is almost enough free time. Even their own children leave the village to settle in a big city. For example, as far as Kurito remembered, Taylor and Greg both went to the capital to become adventure seekers. This is not surprising. Young people always seek movement and change, and he chose a quiet and cozy way of life. He wondered whether you could justly compare yourself with those who recently left the parental nest. He smiled and said that he became the first to leave the capital to the village, which made a great surprise to the guy. The head explained that it brought true happiness to everyone, because otherwise Angelica and Griff would never come to him, which was even more impressed by the young man. They explained that they were glad to see a young man settled here for a long time and advised to maintain the clarity of the mind. In his thoughts, Kurito confessed that he no longer considers himself young. He suggested that he just enjoy his life, and at that moment he was sleeping in the opinion of his father. He remained incredibly happy that lived in this village and sincerely thanked his old age for his support. Bypassing the fields, Kurito realized that he should listen to the advice of old age, who advised to find a matter and recognized her right. After a little more, he noticed a small building, a glass greenhouse where juicy tomatoes ripen. Going closer, he recognized familiar vegetables and made sure that it was tomatoes. But there was no farmer who would grow them, which surprised him. Kurito adored tomatoes and almost dared to buy them, but suddenly he was visited by an unexpected thought. He noted that the vegetables had a somewhat extraordinary shape that resembled onions, and an attractive color that hinted at their incredible juiciness. Behind the Kuritos' back, someone suddenly exclaimed him. He had already had the opportunity to turn and answer how suddenly a shovel was applied to his throat. From this horror, Kurito issued a pronunciation cry, and a stranger, tilting his head so that his eyes were invisible, he strictly warned, "Do not approach them without my permission." He looked at him and strongly stated that he would send him for the lattice for stealing his tomatoes. A man with a distinct rural appearance strictly ordered him to leave, accusing him of stolen tomatoes. The surprised Kurito again asked who was actually the culprit, to which the interlocutor replied, "What could I still be?" He explained that it was just a misunderstanding, because he only noticed the surprisingly formed tomatoes. Then, the man asked who he was, because he saw him for the first time, and asked if he was a village. Kurito replied that he was from the village, and introduced himself, to what the interlocutor nodded with understanding. He realized that he was the guy himself who moved here from the capital. Kurito asked how the interlocutor recognized him, to which he replied that it was very stupid to leave a prosperous capital for the settlement in the middle of nothing. He also added that if he was an elderly person, he would immediately understand it. But Kurito was about the same age. In response, Kurito noted that his language was clearly felt in his language. He began to explain that the wealth of the capital did not make it perfect, arguing that the city is overflowing with people and buildings, but nature was not enough. He added that he prefers rest of rural life, which, in turn, caused surprise to the boy from the village. Despite his capital origin, it was easy to talk to him, and he did not seem too cool. Kirito smiled and said that he understands him. It seems like it is either praised or criticized. He apologized for confusing him with a thief, but added that there would always be those who take things without permission, which caused a surprise to Kirito. He emphasized his dislike for formalisms and immediately asked the interlocutor about his age. He said he was 27 years old. The interlocutor stated in surprise that he could not immediately determine the age, because he has heard such information earlier. He then explained that Kirito was only younger than Andre, but already seemed older, and asked not to mention it in the presence of the latter. Kirito realized that he knew Andre, and realized that he had not even introduced him. He introduced himself as Elga, and told that he was engaged in growing tomatoes. He also noted that at the age of 22, he first appeared in the village, which forced Kirito's surprise to frown. He did not suspect that there was another man in the village. He may be more fun with him. Kirito immediately responded with enthusiasm, explaining that he always wanted to make new friends, but here rarely met young people. Having reached out, Elga noted that they could get to know how to get acquainted, and both shook their hands. He looked at his hand and saw that she was all in the dirt. Elga noted that he joked perfectly. The man, trying to maintain seriousness, stated that it was incredibly funny. Having realized that Elga was a real desert, he immediately apologized to Kirito. He thought he would be able to find common ground with that herb. After washing his hands in the bucket, he asked what kind of tomato varieties were planted, surprised that it was just ordinary tomatoes, to which Kirito firmly replied, "No, they are not at all," and added, "What do you think can be ordinary tomatoes?" This answer was even more impressed by Elga. He explained that he was only familiar with the tomatoes they grow, and added that he went to a nearby village for sale because he was no longer going anywhere. Kirito began to enrich that in this world, the logistics of transportation of products is far from ideal. Without cars and aircraft, all varieties would be spoiled during the journey, and dangerous monsters wandered along the roads. Algo, without being a warrior, did not risk too much. He asked him for a taste tomato, and Elbe, without hesitation, chose one from the full wagon, saying that he was already quite mature. Thanks to him, he in his own thoughts noted that the tomato was quite strong and looked completely ripe. Kirito could not stop stroking him, enjoying his incredible smoothness, but Elvin called him. With restrained seriousness, he ordered him to accelerate the process, which he smiled, agreed, and briefly bitten a piece. The guy enthusiastically said that these tomatoes are much sweeter and sour than others. Elga looked at him and asked if there was something bad. He was satisfied that the taste was incredibly wonderful, even sweeter and more saturated than any other tomato he had ever tasted. Elga, smiling in surprise, understood his admiration. He explained that he had already concluded this, but decided to turn to the man from the capital. Kirito watched carefully, believing that it was only a joke. However, everyone pleases when his efforts are deserved. The words of Kirito were partially true. These tomatoes had an unusual shape, which was significantly different from the usual ones. Their juiciness and taste also have unique qualities. Sweetness and acidity are perfectly balanced, giving extraordinary taste experience. Undoubtedly, Elga put all his heart and soul into growing them. Elga was not aware of their potential. He could not grasp all their greatness because of their own restrictions that seemed unfair to him. At the same time, his thoughts covered not only Elga tomatoes, but also the origins, which especially offended Kirito. Elga unexpectedly interrupted the thoughts of Kirito, asking what is happening to him. In response, Kirito asked the question, disappointed by the fairness of the situation. He noted that the tomatoes had an incredible taste and did not want many pio. Although he said it, in fact, everything seemed absolutely impossible. Crete explained that if they were able to sell their goods in a big city, he would not have to worry about selling. He firmly believed that he would receive good profit, and he argued that he would be able to distribute his tomatoes across the country, which Elga expressed doubt and stated that it was impossible. Gretio insisted that the case was feasible. However, when he was about to tell more about himself, he suddenly died down and thought. He realized that it was the perfect opportunity to make a contribution. He noted that it is much faster to demonstrate than to explain in words. Then he decided to ask Alga if he would refuse to go to the capital in the event that he fails to move instantly. Alga, in surprise, asked what is being discussed. True beauty prevailed on the street. Someone gently strolled, carrying the air with the tune of their song. The festival prevailed in incredible cheerfulness, and a happy senior member of the Adventure Guild glowed among those present. She was happy, because she could finally enjoy the well-deserved day. Gold has demonstrated great energy since Kirito has gained popularity as a carrier. After his departure from the guild, the girl received many complaints from adventurers, but thanks to his balance, she was able to maintain calm in the team. She believed that she deserved a full day off, and therefore decided to take a break from hard work. Smiling, she went to the ice cream cellar and ordered her favorite cold delicacy. Elga suddenly appeared directly in the face of Kushi, causing her a terrible surprise, and she asked abundantly, "What the hell is you taking you do here?" Soon, Kirito joined the dialogue, wondering what business she had here. Meanwhile, when the guy and the girl argued, trying to find out who was right and who was wrong, Elga, covered by fear, could not understand what was happening. The majestic and monumental structure, which was the real castle of Zeller. Watching their conversations, he realized that he could move freely between the capital and distant rural areas, which caused him a great interest in his own personality. She returned to Elga and asked, "Are you his friend?" Elga was surprised because for the first time in his life he faced a creature that combined the traits of man and beast. The girl introduced herself and explained that she works for a guild, he began to push Elga forward, explaining that he just demonstrates his magic. The porridge, puzzled, watched how they were moving. Turning to Kirito, she suggested that he visit them, emphasizing that their guild would always find a place. Smiling, Kirito promised that he would inevitably visit them in the near future. They instantly dissolved in the air, and the Chessie only cast a look at them. Standing firmly on the ground, Kirito decided to clarify everything in detail, hoping that Elga was convinced. He further noted that due to his magic, distance is not a problem. Elga exhaled with relief, confirming it, and then asked him to give him time to gather his thoughts. He replied that moving to the capital was possible, but the real question was where he could sell them. He said that he works in a prestigious trading firm and has excellent links with management, and also noted that thanks to the magic of space, there is a special storage that stores products fresh regardless of volume. Helga was amazed by the success of Kirito and asked if she would find demand for his tomatoes if they get to a big city. Kirito gave a clear explanation of this issue. Is it possible to think that Elga began to fear the royal capital instantly after humility? Outraged, she sharply ordered the guy to silence. Then, turning to Kirito with frank dissatisfaction, she asked, "What is the point that I allow you to take what is in the capital? If such an action brings the wealth of their village, why not try?" Elga looked at him in surprise. He expressed his love for this village and the desire to be useful to him. Despite the fact that he was a stranger, the residents accepted him as his own, and although care may seem unnecessary, he could not refuse an attempt to change the situation for the better. In a serious tone, he again turned to Elga, assuring that he would distribute vegetables from Grief and village not only in the capital, but all over the country, and asked the boy to trust him. He thought about his proposal, and then exclaimed, asking him to be lured, that he was shocking. In response, Elby decided to repeat his request. He was convinced that Elga would be able to sell everything, which is why the guy immediately supported the idea, because he had no doubt. After some beliefs, Elga decides to agree with his proposal and give this chance. He stated that he wanted to check if there would be demand for his tomatoes in the royal capital. Kirito smiled warmly, but the interlocutor continued his conversation. He explained that the money was his main motivation, because in the countryside you do not make big money, but the peasants need money. Kirito smiled nervously and clarified what he agreed. Then, sighing with understanding, he confirmed his right, to which Elga replied that the agreement had power. Shaking his hands, Elba assured that he could count on him, and Kirito replied that he was instructed to him. Remembering their first shock, he asked if some dirt remained in his hands again. The guy replied that he had not brought him with him, as if remembering how Kirito gently held his hands. Nino's house was drawn from the pump when she noticed that someone was reaching her. He attracted her attention, and she immediately noticed Kirito, who greeted her warmly. Then he asked where her parents were working, to which she replied that they were busy in the garden. Lena immediately called them, informing that they came to Kirito. Pureto apologized for being distracted from work. Andrew assured that everything was fine, and decided to find out what happened, even assuming that it was possible to need advice on the city. However, Pureto replied that the case was quite different, and then he put in detail the whole situation. It was surprised to learn that Kurito plans to sell the village's agricultural products in the capital. Confirming his words, the man emphasized that it was definitely great, but he was convinced that the harvest would certainly find the buyer precisely because he is simple, ordinary. To this, Kurito fiercely denied. His products were not so banal. He talked about the onion that he recently tasted, and proudly stated that he had not met such extremely sweet before. Emphasizing her uniqueness, he added that there was nothing like the capital. Andrew, in his opinion, exaggerated a little, but the guy denied strongly. It may sound self-confident, as if it were a real expert, but the harvest in this village was too wonderful to allow the mouth to help you to help. He does not know the exact amount of potatoes, however, given the ease of growing, reserves have always remained stable, and the taste indicated the potential to become the main food. He looked at the audience carefully and noted that if his opinion was, they would not deny. It has been stated that Elgas tomatoes will soon join the business. The more vegetables, dairy products, meat, and other products will be sold, the faster the village will become well-being. Andre asked if a meeting with representatives of this company had already taken place, to which Kurito replied that the acquaintance had taken place recently. Nina, in turn, was interested in whether they planned to sell Elgas tomatoes, and received an affirmative answer. She enthusiastically stated that he loves Elvet Meduse. Kurito quickly realized that she did not participate in the negotiation process, but tried to give her a little support. He replied that they also liked it. He mentioned that he had previously worked in a trading company, so he decided to find out what product he wanted to offer. Fredo confirmed that he worked for Emilio, and noted that these products can be successfully distributed both in the market and in restaurants. He remembered that he had heard about the great influence of this company. Inspired by curiosity, Kurito asked that he could tell her. In response, the interlocutor said he knew only a few facts. Random merchants passed rumors about a company that rapidly gaining momentum. If, in such a development, the magic of Kurito really stood, then everything began to look logically. However, Kurito himself denied, emphasizing that his role was minimal. Smiling, they noted that they were fully relying on him. Stella added that it would be a good support for the family budget. Andrew, although he indicated that such a statement may seem a little humiliating, emphasized that every year they have an excess of the crop. Chirito thanked for consent, and decided to ask if there were still their cultures among their cultures. They'd grown a few crops, but they knew people who had many useful plants at their disposal, so they were invited to visit them. Kurito agreed with joy, saying that it would be nice to visit. Together, they bypassed the neighbors, trying a variety of fruits and vegetables. He noted that their collection is striking and quite sufficient. Everyone was so delicious that it is almost impossible to decide. It was difficult to choose from all the options, but it was not pointless to show everything at once. You first need to get 1,000,000 sales, otherwise it is not possible to save. He remembered his appearance, and decided that it was time to listen to his advice. Thanks to his support, he was able to create the largest company in an incredibly short time. If he did not see this personal gain, he could still openly express his opinion or give up, despite their friendship. That was this man. He understood that tomorrow's meeting with him would decide everything. There was wonderful weather on the street. The sky was virtually not covered with clouds. In luxurious estates, a wonderful maid worked tirelessly. Appearing behind the girl, he announced his return. She turned to him and met his gaze filled with unwavering determination. She turned to him with a greeting, calling him Mr. Kurito, to which he, in surprise, replied that she was quickly adapting. She added that she would not be able to become the main servant if she was constantly surprised. At the same time, Kurito mentally acknowledged that she found her true calling. The video asked if something happened during his absence. She answered negatively and explained that Mr. Emilio had left no messages. Tiarito added that he had business with Mr. Emilio, and he was going to visit the company, hoping that he will not be too busy. Elsa reassured him, noting that Kurito had no reason to excite. He was sitting in the living room, and as soon as he saw Kurito, he smiled sincerely and greeted. The guy, assuming that he was at home, asked in surprise what a stranger was doing here. Emilio explained that he decided to stay home on his way back for a short way, and Kurito added that he knew when he would return. The guy perceived it as a common situation, But Emilio was not surprised at all. Then he wondered if he liked to live in the village of Garan. He smiled and replied that he had spent time there as never had been able to in the capital, explaining that this place gave a real feeling of relaxation. Emilio thoughtfully confirmed that, despite the fact that his physical form was not faded, Kurito got the harvest from the storage, and Emilio asked what it was for the products. He replied that it was a gift of his native village. Hardly the guy turned and was about to leave, as Kurito stopped him. Kurito stated that he had just hanged it out, explaining that the product is wonderful. Emilio, in turn, noted that it was just a common culture, and, with a concern, added that the peasants were asked for him. He emphasized that in this case he denies himself the order, because even if Kurito asked, it would not meet the interests of the company. Kurito became more serious, and explained that he did not bring them because of someone's demands. He convinced that the goods would certainly find buyers, and stressed that he would never betray either Emilio or the villagers. Emilio sighed, acknowledging the rightness of Kurito, and sincerely apologized to him. He explained that everything should be checked in person, because this is the key to successful business. In addition, to interrupt a person who has not yet presented his products was considered very impolite. The fact that it was of the highest value was explained by Kurito, with an integral certainty that the advantage of taste was always the main criterion. Indeed, whatever Kurito said, the only aspect that really was important was the taste. However, it was this property that had the greatest power of belief. Fortunately, he chose the taste of food. If the foreseeing is positive, the rest of the dishes will cause approving emotions. It is necessary to start with raw vegetables. Puerto served him already sliced vegetables, and Emilio, struck by his thorough preparation, decided to try onions, boldly taking a piece to his mouth. It was instantly swept by a real shock. He was pleasantly surprised by the extraordinary sweetness of the summer delicacy, which immediately melted in his mouth. This was confirmed by Kurito's smile. He explained that on low heat, gradually softening, the food will become even sweeter, and Tamelo tasted the tomato and was surprised that he was sweet and delicious, like a real fruit. Fredo nodded, thinking that he was most liked. Emilio explained that these tomatoes are completely different from the watery and acidic selling in their area. They had a rich, wonderful taste, where sweetness and acid were perfectly combined. Fredo decided to refrain from comments that he could turn into a real review. He promised to call Dels to make soup from these tomatoes. One of the boys warned him so that he did not exaggerate. Then he asked Kurito to go to the next tasting, after which he added that the guy seems to be beginning to feel a real excitement. In response, Kurito asked his friend if he liked it and whether he would find his buyer's product. After completing the tasting, Emilio once again apologized for harsh words, explaining that he could never confuse the right product. The crop from the village of Rog was really marked by high quality, and, provided a well-organized sale, could bring considerable profit. He barely intended to say something as Emilio assured him that he had brought an exceptional product. Putting his hand on his heart, Emilio assured that his company would marry the horror crop and rural goods, giving the word on it. He invited Kurito to join the development of a sales strategy, because the expansion involved a lot of work, and Kurito easily agreed. The days later, Andre moved to his post. I am sure that everything continues with the usual course, and nothing is unusual. One moment, as he suddenly appeared in a short distance of Kurito and greeted. Andre felt fear and sharply brought a spear, but the guy shouted that he was Kurito. He recognized him and warned that he was no longer scared. Kurito apologized, explaining that today it was his change. Remembering Alina's reaction, he retreated for some distance. Soon Andre noted that he had not been seen in the village for a long time, and asked what had happened. The guy replied that he was in the capital for the purpose of selling the crop that was presented to him. Suddenly, he began to ask how everything went, without giving another opportunity to speak. Fredo asked him to give an explanation, and Andre, nodding his head, calmed down something. Fredo noted that he understood his ardent interest in the case, but suggested gathering everyone in the central square. Andres replied that he would seek help from Stella and Nina. Looking at him, Fredo did not expect such a strong reaction. People began the gathering around the central square, overflowing with surprise, discussing the events that have taken place. He did not expect so many people, but suddenly realized that they came with families. Was the harvest really so important to them? He began to worry as if he were preparing for a presentation in front of a large company. However, suddenly someone shouted behind him. Elga, fervently interested in her harvest, began to ask a number of questions. He replied that first it should be calmed down, and then he would tell all the details. Elga, despite this, admitted that because of all these conversations, in night sadness could not fall asleep. At the same time, someone asked him to stop teasing, calling him his brother, which forced Kurito in surprise to blink. He introduced them, calling her his sister to extent, and thanked Kurito for his help with his brother. Kurito acknowledged that he had never heard of his sister, to which Elgar explained that she took care of tomatoes. Smiling, Kurito noted that he was pleased to meet her, and Elgar whispered to his ear that she is one of the few free girls in the village. Someone hit him on the cheek and stated that his business was not decided, to which Elvis added that everything was just a joke. Soon Nina approached Kurito behind, smiling, and the guy, in surprise, asked what had happened. After indicating the audience, she noted that she could no longer stand up. Kurito stated that it was time to take things up, and, apologizing to the whole community for the created inconvenience, continued to report on the results of the agreement. It was not easy for Kurito with this topic, but he was entrusted with such an important thing, even with a completely unfamiliar person. In addition, he did everything he could, and continued his report. He explained that their harvest did not find himself on the shelves of stores. Everyone was surprised and the discussion soon began, but this surprise just started. The problem is not that it cannot be sold, but that it cannot be put on sale by shops. Alga asked what he was in mind, to what Kurito answered, what he would explain. He begins to mention the conversation with Emilio, who was interested in whether it is familiar with Purito with the goods sold. Purito confidently replied that he knew, and said that the assortment consists mainly of seafood and rare meat. At the same time, he looked at Emilio in surprise. He realized that here it is, to which his friend agreed, adding that they were not engaged in the sale of agricultural products, because it can be purchased anywhere. There is no port in the royal capital, so it is impossible to provide perishable fish and mollusks, as well as rare delicacies, the demand for which is huge. The city is overflowing with farms that sell standard meat and vegetables, but their assortment does not satisfy the needs of the original trading company. In addition, the market was already rooted, and in such circumstances, it was simply unprofitable to fight for it. If you start the product under your own brand, it will not find buyers. For ordinary people, the most important thing was that everything was inexpensive and delicious. That is why Emilio refused to do vegetables. Kurito realized that this niche was already busy, and warned that apparently the attempt could end up. However, his friend interrupted him, noting that he only spoke of the complexity of the situation, but not about the impossibility of success, which caused a surprised look in Kurito. Emilio explained that it is not necessary to sell it on the market, as they can be supplied with a group to restaurants. In confusion, Kurito asked, after which Emilio continued. High-quality restaurants focused mainly on noble and royal clients. He explained that there is an event where all trading companies enter into contracts with restaurants. Although the contract was already at its disposal, but solely for the supply of seafood. He noted that the opportunity to sell there and these vegetables would expand the effect of the contract. Video vegetables. Now they have gained the name and confidence of consumers. Of course, the taste, freshness, and quality played a lot of important role, but even Magic Kurito could not change them. Emilio also noted that although it is a good beginning, it is not enough to achieve the goal. He explained to him that other reliable contracts with contracts also have considerable potential. Although they have a broader market coverage when it comes to vegetables and other everyday products, no one chooses them. Of course, it would be extremely difficult to give up the usual suppliers. That is why the situation with restaurants was complicated. They needed to create a bright advertising campaign so that other companies almost not noticed, and besides, a tasting show could be used. He was right. In the capital, it is impossible to impress people with huge vegetables. That is why he began to seriously deal with this business. If he fails to come up with something original himself, it will be unfair. He thought about an advertising strategy when Elsa interrupted his thoughts with a question if he wanted tea. Barely looking at her for a moment, he got an unexpected but very interesting inspiration. His gaze stopped at Elsa, and he realized that it was undoubtedly the best option that could be successful. In order to sell high-quality products to elite restaurants, Kurito was forced to attend the event where all suppliers gathered, and he had a carefully elaborated secret plan. Someone came to the representatives of the restaurants, inviting them to leave one by one. The space was filled with chefs, a variety of dishes and aromas that were pouring on all sides. The girls invited guests to tasting, where they represented Emilia's products. However, a very large number of people gathered here. In the crowd, the question began to be heard. Does Emilio do not only sell fishery products? One of the present was interested in what kind of clothing was presented, while others reassured that they were just interested in. One of the satellites approached Kurito and noted that his act became a great advertising course, to which the latter replied that the chances of success really exist. He acknowledged that Kurito surprised him, because he did not expect such an original approach, and his friend only laughed gently. He did not make much effort, so he immediately thanked the girls. On the eve of the event, at the decisive moment, Kurito suggested involving Elts and other girls in the promotion of vegetables and asked their attitude towards this idea. Emilio and Elsa looked at him in surprise. Barris asked him what they planned to do. However, Kurito, filled with guilt, apologized to Elsa with a heavy breath, saying that he had not to mention it, and asked her to forget everything. He noted that such behavior is reminiscent of harassment, which can adversely affect future unrest. Emilio asked, "What is the bad thing about it?" "What?" He laughed, slightly embarrassed, and replied that it was a rather unusual idea, because he did not even hope that his friend would be able to come up with something new. Kurito explained that he was still at the height of his capabilities. He explained that it was not a bad idea, because most chefs are men, and if they were served by beautiful girls, they would agree with more eagerness. Viorito asked if it was justified for signing contracts with prestigious restaurants, if the case is not concerned. Emilio added that noble people and royal members do not attend such measures, because they belong only to their environment. Companies are desperately looking for better ingredients and more profitable deals. In fact, a real hunt broke out under the ground. Even the banquet guests got into this process. Pureto was extremely surprised by such a turn of events. He noted that this would probably not be enough. Kurito made arguments and suggested that he be replaced in the national costume of his homeland to serve the guests. He became interested in his homeland, which was in the Far East. Kurito nodded and noted that in the capital, such things are rare, so they will certainly attract attention. He explained that for some reason, he could not move to his hometown, so it will be very difficult to get to it. However, Kurito kept in memory at least an approximate appearance of clothing and could make it according to the traditional technique. It was confirmed that all this sounded extremely tempting. In such situations, Emilio proved to be especially useful, because he never questioned the details. He cast a quick look at Elsa and noted that he first needed to get their consent, which Kurito agreed, emphasizing that the permission could not be obtained. Kurito agreed, noting that all you need to do is just dress and serve the company's customers. This was not different from their usual responsibilities, so he was reassured, warning that everything would be normal. He clarified again, and again received confirmation that everything was fine. He explained that, coming out of the herd, they could help Emilio, and she added that Mr. Vester had almost never asked them. However, they were always ready to put a shoulder in a difficult moment. She stated that she would have been trusted if he trusted her. But Kurito prevailed before he had to say something, and Emilio noted that she could not decide for everyone. Meanwhile, curious girls were already in the door, listening to their conversation, and they wondered what traditional costumes of Mr. Kurito looked like, how different they were, and what a charming smile they had. He turned and seriously stated that he agreed. Emilio, sincerely smiling, added that the decision was already made, to which Kurito reported that he had a different idea. Explained that this solution will allow you to diversify the dishes they served. One of the cooks drew attention to the unusual onion. It was huge and unsurpassed. The other added that the tomatoes were incredibly delicious and so juicy that they could be consumed just. Some even asked for an additional portion. It has been confirmed that the concept of Kuritos, to bring girls to tasting, successfully took place. His friend noted that he only had to taste them to grasp all the greatness of rural vegetables. He also recognized that he was wondering how the secret plan of Kurito would come true, and asked not to undergo any pressure. Elsa quietly came from behind the boys and sincerely apologized for the delay. Only Kurito wanted to assure everyone that everything was okay, as he was suddenly met with her appearance. The samples were ready and should be fed to the restaurant. Kurito thanked her for the organization. A middle-aged man looked carefully and was interested in where this unusual aroma came from. Elsa approached him and offered to taste vegetable dishes. Seeing this, the man asked what a delicacy. He had never seen one before, so he suggested that he was just a boiler dish. But he was mistaken. He noted that it looks extremely. She explained that it is a traditional dish of one of the countries of the East, stewed, a mixture of potatoes and pork with the addition of onions and tomatoes. She also stressed that all the dishes are made from vegetables supplied by Emilio, which the chef said he was hearing for the first time. Surprised by the unsurpassed taste of the dish, I felt as if it were a real first course. Its delicate texture and delicate taste made an unforgettable impression, thanks to the expressive sweets of vegetables and tomatoes. Undoubtedly, this recipe will be like the real gourmet. He was a real connoisseur of their vegetables. In addition, he was interested in both the prescription and the prospects for long-term cooperation. Suddenly, behind the girls appeared Emilio, the director of the company, ready to tell all the details. They whispered about a prominent personality, Mr. Chamonter, the owner of a luxurious 5-star restaurant and one of the most prominent chefs in the world. It is said to have avoided the conclusion of long-term contracts. If these products really deserved such a reputation, the girls approached people without hesitation, offering to taste their dishes and explaining that the range has many more options. He goes aside and watches people enjoy appetizing food and lively conversations. It was at this point that Elsa approached him and admired that all this was incredible. He reported that all restaurants were looking forward to contracting with Emilio, as the result exceeded all their expectations. She added that it was the dish proposed by Kurito that played a crucial role. He explained that his country was mostly appreciated, and she emphasized that the chef was interested in recipe. Although, as she said, he was probably not on the menu. The dish has changed significantly after adding vegetables from the village rig, turning into a completely different culinary find. Fortunately, in this world there was a seasoning, similar to soy sauce. Although its preparation was extremely complicated, the chef carefully remembered all the details of the recipe. In their stew, tomatoes always found themselves, although he later realized that they should not be there. However, the dish was much more delicious thanks to this addition, which made it think, does it resemble this taste of nostalgia? He confirmed and remembered that the mother always prepared while she was alive. Despite the fact that he did not like the tomatoes, she is always impressed with her creativity. Elsa expressed gratitude for helping to recreate that special taste, as well as for all the dishes she created. She explained that she could handle herself, but everything turned out through his support. She smiled sincerely and said that the council was helping Mr. Kurito, which he looked at her in surprise. He realized that it was impossible to achieve such success on its own, and when his culture brought these results, he felt that his presence in the world was true. Realizing that nothing should be forgotten, he accepted the fact that although difficult moments occurred in the past, the number of his wonderful memories blocked them. He realized that his task was accomplished, and that he successfully paid his duty as a thief.